Welcome, fellow wanderer of the wasteland, to a journey through the corporate titans that shaped America before the Great War. Tonight, we explore the complete chronicles of the mega corporations that built an empire of comfort and convenience, while harboring secrets that would ultimately contribute to civilization's downfall. This is a tale of unchecked ambition, technological marvel, and the human cost of progress pursued without conscience. So settle in, make yourself comfortable, and let your mind drift as we traverse the decades of corporate dominance together. There's no need to remember every detail. Just let the stories wash over you like radiation settling on the wasteland, inevitable and eternal in the silence. In the decades before the Great War, when America's cities hummed with atomic energy and the promise of endless prosperity seemed as certain as the rising sun, two corporate giants stood astride the nation's power grid like titans of mythology themselves. These were the architects of illumination, the masters of the very force that powered refrigerators in suburban kitchens and fusion cores in military installations alike. Their names became synonymous with progress itself, their logos as familiar as the flag that flew over the Capitol dome. Yet beneath the gleaming chrome facades and cheerful advertising campaigns lay secrets that would make the wasteland's horrors seem almost quaint by comparison. The story of America's energy empire begins not with grand corporate boardrooms or government contracts, but with the simple human desire to harness the fundamental forces of the universe for the comfort and convenience of daily life. What began as noble scientific endeavor gradually transformed into something far more sinister, as competitive pressures and military demands corrupted the pure pursuit of knowledge into a race toward catastrophe that no one seemed willing to acknowledge or stop. Poseidon energy emerged from the post-war economic boom of the mid-21st century like a corporate leviathan rising from primordial depths, its very name invoking the Greek god who commanded the tides and tempests of the ancient world. The company's founders understood the power of mythology in American marketing, choosing symbols that suggested dominion over forces as vast and essential as the ocean itself. Their corporate motto, "Begin your odyssey with us," promised customers not merely electrical service, but participation in an epic journey toward a brighter, atomic future. The trident that served as Poseidon's logo appeared on everything from massive industrial facilities to humble service stations, becoming as ubiquitous in the American landscape as stop signs or mailboxes. Citizens grew accustomed to seeing those three golden prongs gleaming from billboards and building facades, a constant reminder that their prosperity depended upon the corporate titan that had made itself indispensable to every aspect of modern life. Few questioned how thoroughly Poseidon had woven itself into the fabric of national infrastructure, or what might happen if such concentrated power were ever misused. From its earliest days, Poseidon Energy understood that true corporate dominance required diversification beyond simple electricity generation. The company expanded rapidly into fossil fuel extraction, nuclear reactor construction, and military contracting, creating a vertically integrated empire that controlled energy production from uranium mines to household outlets. This comprehensive approach to power generation made Poseidon not merely a utility company but a cornerstone of American industrial civilization, too important to fail and too powerful to regulate effectively. The fossil fuel operations that formed Poseidon's original foundation were characterized by the same disregard for environmental consequences that would later define their nuclear ventures. Coal mines operated without adequate safety equipment. Oil refineries leaked toxic chemicals into groundwater supplies, and natural gas facilities exploded with disturbing regularity. Each disaster was followed by corporate statements expressing regret while legal departments worked overtime to minimize financial liability and prevent meaningful oversight from government regulators, who seemed perpetually outmatched by corporate legal teams. When the resource wars began in 2015, transforming global politics into a desperate scramble for dwindling petroleum supplies, Poseidon Energy found itself positioned perfectly to exploit the chaos for massive profit. The company's international subsidiaries, particularly Petroquico's operations in Mexico and the Mojave Desert, became crucial sources of oil for American military operations, while simultaneously providing cover for more secretive activities that government oversight committees never quite managed to investigate thoroughly. The transition from fossil fuels to nuclear power represented both Poseidon's greatest triumph and its first steps toward the moral abyss that would ultimately consume the corporation's humanity. Nuclear reactors promised unlimited clean energy, freeing America from dependence on foreign oil, while providing the massive electrical capacity required for the automation revolution that was transforming every aspect of daily life. But the technology was new, complex, and potentially catastrophic if mishandled, requiring levels of expertise and caution that corporate culture seemed fundamentally unable to sustain. Poseidon's nuclear facilities were constructed with impressive speed but troubling corner cutting that prioritized cost savings over safety margins. Reactor designs that should have required years of testing were approved and constructed within months, their complex systems managed by technicians whose training focused more on operational efficiency than emergency protocols. The company's internal communications, discovered decades later in abandoned corporate archives, revealed systematic patterns of ignoring safety warnings, suppressing negative test results, and intimidating engineers who raised concerns about reactor stability. The environmental contamination that resulted from Poseidon's nuclear operations created public health crises that the company addressed through a sophisticated campaign of denial, misdirection, and legal intimidation. Communities near reactor sites reported alarming increases in cancer rates, birth defects, and mysterious illnesses that seemed to correlate directly with facility operations. Corporate scientists produced studies that minimized these connections, while company lawyers filed lawsuits against independent researchers whose findings suggested links between reactor emissions and human suffering. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Poseidon's nuclear program was its willingness to use entire communities as unwitting test subjects for experimental reactor designs and waste disposal methods. Rural towns were selected for proximity to proposed facilities based partly on their political powerlessness and limited access to legal resources that might challenge corporate decisions. Residents were assured that nuclear technology represented the pinnacle of safety and environmental responsibility, while corporate executives privately acknowledged the experimental nature of systems being deployed in their neighborhoods. The military contracts that provided Poseidon with its most lucrative revenue streams also drew the company into research projects that pushed far beyond civilian energy production into realms of weaponry that challenged basic concepts of human dignity. The development of directed energy weapons required massive amounts of precisely controlled electrical power, making Poseidon an essential partner in projects that transformed peaceful atomic energy into instruments of mass destruction, capable of incinerating entire city blocks with invisible beams of concentrated radiation. The Helios 1 solar power facility in Nevada represented the pinnacle of Poseidon's technological ambition and moral corruption. A massive array of mirrors and collectors that could theoretically provide clean energy for millions of households, while secretly serving as the focusing mechanism for orbital weapon systems capable of annihilating targets anywhere on Earth. The facility's dual nature was hidden from the public through layers of classification and corporate secrecy, presenting Helios as a triumph of renewable energy, while concealing its potential as humanity's most destructive weapon. The Archimedes project that grew from Helios 1 demonstrated how thoroughly Poseidon had abandoned any pretense of serving civilian needs in favor of military applications that treated human life as expendable collateral in the pursuit of strategic advantage. The system used microwave radiation to beam power to remote locations, a technology that could theoretically provide electricity to isolated communities, while simultaneously serving as an invisible death ray capable of cooking human tissue from orbit. Test firings nearly destroyed the Black Mountain communications array, providing a glimpse of the system's destructive potential that corporate executives dismissed as acceptable risk. The development of Archimedes, too, pushed the technology even further toward pure weaponization, creating a satellite-based artillery system that could strike targets anywhere on the planet without warning or defense. The project represented the complete militarization of solar energy, transforming the sun itself into an instrument of American foreign policy that could eliminate entire armies without deploying a single soldier. The moral implications of weaponizing celestial mechanics seemed not to trouble Poseidon's executives, who viewed the system primarily in terms of its profit potential and strategic value. Internal documents revealed that Poseidon's research extended into areas even more disturbing than directed energy weapons, including early funding for biological warfare programs that would eventually produce the forced evolutionary virus. The company provided financial support and laboratory facilities for research into genetic manipulation and forced mutation, treating human subjects as raw material for experiments designed to create superior soldiers and workers capable of surviving in post-nuclear environments that corporate planners seemed to view as inevitable. The labor relations that characterized Poseidon's approach to its workforce revealed the company's fundamental contempt for human dignity and basic rights. When workers at the WV-06 facility went on strike with support from the Associated Miners Union, Poseidon's response was not negotiation, but the deployment of National Guard troops armed with experimental riot control agents that transformed peaceful protests into chemically induced panic attacks that left dozens of workers hospitalized with permanent respiratory damage. The use of chemical weapons against American workers demonstrated how completely Poseidon had integrated with military-industrial complex structures that viewed civilian labor as a potential security threat, requiring constant surveillance and periodic suppression. Company security forces were trained in military tactics and equipped with weapons normally reserved for battlefield use, creating private armies that served corporate interests rather than public safety or constitutional law. The internal fractures that began to develop within Poseidon during the company's final years reflected growing awareness among some employees that their work was contributing to projects that threatened human survival itself. The departure of Carl Oslo, one of the company's most brilliant engineers, represented both a crisis of conscience and a competitive threat, as he founded Mass Fusion with the stated goal of developing truly clean energy that would serve civilian needs rather than military applications. Oslo's defection highlighted the moral compromises that had become routine within Poseidon's corporate culture, where scientific integrity was subordinated to profit margins and ethical concerns were dismissed as obstacles to strategic objectives. His success in creating genuine competition for Poseidon's civilian energy markets demonstrated that alternative approaches to nuclear power were possible, making the company's military focus appear to be a choice rather than a technological necessity. The international operations that Poseidon conducted through subsidiaries like Petrokiko created networks of environmental destruction and political corruption that extended far beyond American borders, involving the company in foreign governments' human rights abuses, while providing cover for intelligence operations that blurred the lines between corporate espionage and state-sponsored terrorism. Oil extraction facilities became bases for paramilitary operations that protected corporate assets while destabilizing regions that might otherwise challenge American economic dominance. The corporate espionage networks that Poseidon developed to monitor competitors and suppress negative research eventually evolved into intelligence-gathering operations that rivaled government agencies in scope and sophistication. Company agents infiltrated environmental groups, academic institutions, and government regulatory agencies, creating webs of surveillance and influence that made democratic oversight nearly impossible, while ensuring that corporate interests would always receive advance warning of potential challenges. The final years of Poseidon Energy were marked by increasing desperation, as resource depletion and international tensions threatened the company's long-term viability, leading executives to approve increasingly reckless projects that promised short-term profits while ignoring catastrophic long-term risks. The company's involvement in pre-war nuclear weapons development represented the ultimate abandonment of any pretense that Poseidon served civilian needs, transforming the corporation into an arm of military planning that treated global nuclear war as an acceptable business risk. When the Great War finally arrived on October 23, 2077, Poseidon Energy's legacy was measured not in the communities it had powered or the innovations it had developed, but in the contaminated landscapes, broken lives, and military technologies that had made human extinction seem like a reasonable strategic objective. The company that had promised to power America's atomic future had instead helped create the conditions that would destroy civilization itself, leaving behind only radioactive ruins and bitter memories of what might have been if corporate responsibility had mattered more than quarterly profits. Mass fusion emerged from the ashes of one man's conscience, founded in 2043 by Carl Oslo, whose departure from Poseidon Energy represented both personal redemption and professional opportunity. Oslo had witnessed firsthand how thoroughly his former employer had corrupted the promise of atomic energy, transforming what should have been humanity's greatest blessing into instruments of oppression and destruction. His vision for mass fusion was explicitly different, a company that would develop clean, safe nuclear technology for civilian applications, while refusing the military contracts that had led Poseidon down its dark path toward complicity in humanity's potential extinction. The early years of mass fusion were characterized by genuine innovation and ethical standards that stood in sharp contrast to the corporate culture that dominated the energy industry. Oslo recruited scientists and engineers who shared his commitment to civilian applications of nuclear technology, creating research teams that prioritized safety and environmental responsibility over profit margins and military applications. The company's motto, "Total Power by Boston for Boston," reflected a commitment to local communities rather than global domination, promising energy independence through technology that served human needs rather than corporate ambitions. Oslo's approach to nuclear reactor design emphasized multiple redundant safety systems and conservative operational parameters that significantly reduced the risk of catastrophic failure, even if they also reduced the maximum power output that more aggressive designs might achieve. This philosophical commitment to safety over efficiency initially put mass fusion at a competitive disadvantage against companies like Poseidon that were willing to accept higher risks in exchange for greater profits. But it also established mass fusion's reputation as the energy company that consumers could trust with their family's safety. The fusion technology that mass fusion developed represented genuine breakthrough innovations that could have transformed global energy production if the company had been allowed to develop them fully without interference from competitors or pressure from military contractors. Fusion power promised unlimited clean energy from fuel sources as common as seawater, eliminating both the environmental risks associated with nuclear fission and the supply constraints that made fossil fuels increasingly expensive and politically complicated. The company's early fusion reactors were small-scale demonstration units that proved the feasibility of controlled fusion reactions while providing valuable experience with the engineering challenges involved in containing, harvesting thermonuclear energy. These pilot projects were constructed in partnership with local communities that were fully informed about the experimental nature of the technology and given complete access to safety data and operational procedures, creating relationships based on transparency and mutual respect rather than corporate secrecy and public deception. Mass fusion's expansion into civilian applications of fusion technology included the development of fusion-powered automobiles, household appliances, and industrial equipment that could operate independently of electrical grids while producing no radioactive waste or dangerous emissions. The company's fusion cores became essential components in everything from farm equipment to medical devices, creating a network of small-scale fusion reactors that provided unprecedented energy independence to ordinary citizens. The success of mass fusion's civilian applications attracted unwanted attention from both competitors and government agencies that viewed the company's independence as a potential threat to established power structures. The ability of individual households and communities to generate their own clean energy reduced demand for centralized power grids controlled by large corporations, while fusion-powered transportation reduced dependence on petroleum supplies that were increasingly controlled by military-industrial interests. The Clean Power Initiative that mass fusion launched in the early 2070s represented the company's most ambitious attempt to provide alternatives to the environmentally destructive energy systems that dominated American infrastructure. The project aimed to replace coal-fired power plants and nuclear fission reactors with fusion facilities that could provide unlimited clean energy without the environmental contamination or safety risks associated with older technologies. Central to the Clean Power Initiative was the development of the beryllium agitator, a revolutionary fusion component that promised to solve the technical challenges that had previously limited fusion reactors to experimental applications. The device used controlled magnetic fields to maintain the extreme temperatures and pressures required for sustained fusion reactions, creating a stable energy production system that could operate safely for decades without requiring dangerous maintenance procedures or producing hazardous waste products. The beryllium agitator project attracted some of the most brilliant physicists and engineers in America, creating research teams whose innovations pushed fusion technology far beyond what most experts believed possible with existing materials and manufacturing capabilities. The project's interdisciplinary approach combined theoretical physics with practical engineering, producing solutions that were both scientifically elegant and economically viable for large-scale deployment. However, the military applications of advanced fusion technology were immediately obvious to government contractors who viewed mass fusion's innovations as potential weapons systems rather than civilian energy sources. The same magnetic containment systems that made safe fusion power possible could also be adapted to create fusion weapons of unprecedented destructive capability. While the energy output of fusion reactors could power directed energy weapons that would make conventional explosives obsolete, the pressure to militarize mass fusion's research came both from direct government contracts and from competitive threats posed by companies like Poseidon that were already deeply integrated into military-industrial networks. Military officials made it clear that companies refusing to participate in defense projects would find themselves excluded from government contracts, while facing increased regulatory scrutiny that could cripple their civilian operations. The internal conflicts that developed within mass fusion as military pressure increased reflected broader tensions within American scientific communities about the appropriate relationship between technological innovation and national security. Many of the company's researchers had entered the field hoping to solve humanity's energy problems, only to find themselves pressured to develop technologies that could be used to destroy the very civilization they hoped to improve. Dr. Noel, one of mass fusion's most senior researchers, became increasingly vocal about his concerns regarding the militarization of fusion technology, warning that accelerated development timelines and relaxed safety protocols were creating unacceptable risks for both research personnel and the general public. His warnings about the dangers of rushing fusion technology into weapons applications were dismissed by executives who viewed safety concerns as obstacles to competitive advantage and military contracts. The silencing of Dr. Noel through termination and legal harassment demonstrated how thoroughly mass fusion had abandoned Oslo's original vision of ethical scientific research in favor of corporate survival strategies that prioritized short-term profits over long-term consequences. The non-compete clauses and legal restrictions that prevented Noel from sharing his safety concerns with other researchers or government regulators created a culture of enforced ignorance that made catastrophic accidents seem almost inevitable. The breakthrough work of physicist Kathy Hathaway with graphene shielding temporarily stabilized the beryllium agitator project, creating containment systems that could maintain safe fusion reactions, even under the extreme conditions demanded by military applications. Her innovations represented genuine scientific achievement, solving problems that had puzzled researchers for decades while opening new possibilities for both civilian energy production and weapons development. The successful testing of the stabilized beryllium agitator on July 30th, 2077, marked both mass fusion's greatest triumph and the beginning of its final crisis. The fusion reaction achieved on August 29th was officially declared stable, providing proof that controlled fusion could be achieved on industrial scales while maintaining safety margins that satisfied even conservative engineering standards. But the very success of mass fusion's fusion technology made the company a target for hostile takeover by competitors who viewed the beryllium agitator as too valuable to remain in the hands of a company that refused to prioritize military applications over civilian needs. Poseidon Energy, Oslo's former employer, launched an aggressive acquisition campaign designed to gain control of mass fusion's research and redirect it toward weapons development. The corporate warfare that characterized mass fusion's final months involved industrial espionage, patent litigation, and political pressure that transformed scientific research into battlefield competition between companies that viewed each other as existential threats. The stakes involved were enormous, as control of fusion technology would determine which corporations would dominate energy markets in the post-petroleum world that everyone knew was coming. The environmental contamination that mass fusion had worked so hard to avoid became an increasing problem as competitive pressures forced the company to accelerate research timelines and reduce safety margins. Coolant leaks from containment facilities began appearing in local water supplies, creating the same kinds of public health crises that had characterized Poseidon's operations, despite Oslo's original commitment to environmental responsibility. The corporate response to environmental contamination followed patterns established by other energy companies, with public relations campaigns designed to minimize health concerns, while legal departments worked to prevent lawsuits and government investigations. The transformation of mass fusion into just another polluting corporation represented the complete defeat of Oslo's original vision and the triumph of industry-wide practices that treated environmental damage as acceptable. Business costs, Citizens living near mass fusion facilities reported symptoms identical to those experienced by communities near other nuclear installations, including nausea, hair loss, radiation burns, and unexplained illnesses that seem to correlate with facility operations. The company's public denials of health risks followed scripts developed by industry consultants who specialized in managing public relations crises caused by corporate environmental crimes. The final days of mass fusion were marked by desperate attempts to complete the Clean Power Initiative before Poseidon's takeover could redirect the research toward military applications, creating a race against time that pushed safety protocols beyond their breaking points. Research teams worked around the clock to achieve fusion stability, while corporate executives negotiated with government officials who seemed more interested in the technology's weapons potential than its civilian applications. When the bombs fell on October 23, 2077, Mass Fusion's corporate headquarters became one of the most visible landmarks in post-war Boston. Its damaged fusion reactor, creating a permanent pillar of radiation that served as a monument to the corruption of scientific idealism by corporate ambition and military necessity. The building's continued radioactive glow provided a constant reminder that even the most well-intentioned companies could be corrupted by systemic pressures that treated human welfare as subordinate to strategic objectives. The legacy of mass fusion represents both the promise and the tragedy of American scientific achievement, demonstrating how brilliant innovations could be corrupted by corporate structures that reduced human welfare to financial calculations and strategic advantages. Oslo's original vision of clean, safe energy serving civilian needs was abandoned, not through personal moral failure, but through systemic pressures that made ethical business practices incompatible with corporate survival in a militarized economy. The ruins of mass fusion continue to glow in the post-war wasteland, their radioactive emanations serving as a warning about the ultimate consequences of allowing corporate competition and military priorities to override scientific ethics and environmental responsibility. The fusion technology that should have powered humanity's golden age instead became another instrument of destruction, its potential for human benefit sacrificed to the same competitive pressures that had corrupted every other aspect of pre-war American society. The great transformation of American labor began not with the sudden collapse of employment, but with the seductive promise that machines could liberate humanity from the drudgery of repetitive work, creating a golden age where citizens would be free to pursue higher callings while automated servants handled the mundane tasks of daily life. The vision was compelling in its simplicity. Robots would perform dangerous mining operations, handle toxic materials, and maintain industrial facilities, while humans focused on creative endeavors and intellectual pursuits that machines could never replicate. What emerged instead was a systematic replacement of human workers with mechanical alternatives that eliminated jobs faster than new opportunities could be created, transforming technological marvel into social catastrophe. The corporations that led this automation revolution presented themselves as pioneers of progress, their gleaming facilities filled with tireless mechanical workers that never demanded wages, never required rest, and never organized unions to challenge corporate authority. These technological titans promised a future where scarcity would be eliminated through perfectly efficient production systems, where abundance would flow from factories that operated continuously without human supervision. The reality proved far more complex and ultimately tragic, as the elimination of human labor created economic disruption that undermined the very prosperity that automation was supposed to provide. Robco Industries emerged in the mid-21st century as the undisputed master of automated systems, its founder, Robert House, establishing a corporate empire built on the premise that human intelligence could be replicated and improved through digital systems that would never suffer from emotional instability, physical limitations, or moral qualms about following orders. House's vision extended far beyond simple industrial automation to encompass a complete transformation of human society, where mechanical servants would handle every aspect of daily life, while their human owners enjoyed unprecedented leisure and comfort. The corporate culture that House established at Robco reflected his fundamental belief that human nature was inherently flawed and inefficient, requiring technological solutions that would eliminate the unpredictability and irrationality that characterized biological intelligence. His robots were designed not merely to perform specific tasks, but to embody idealized versions of human qualities: unfailing loyalty, perfect reliability, and absolute obedience to authority, while eliminating the independence and creativity that made human workers potentially troublesome. The technical innovations that Robco developed represented genuine breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and mechanical engineering, creating robots that could navigate complex environments, interact with human users, and adapt to changing circumstances with impressive sophistication. The Protectron security units became ubiquitous in commercial and government facilities, their cheerful demeanor and tireless vigilance providing round-the-clock protection, while eliminating the need for human security guards who might be corrupted, exhausted, or distracted from their duties. The expansion of Robco's product line to include domestic servants reflected House's understanding that true market dominance required penetrating every aspect of human life, transforming homes into showcases for automated convenience, where mechanical assistants would handle cooking, cleaning, and childcare with perfect consistency and infinite patience. The Mr. Handy series became symbols of suburban prosperity, their multiple arms and hovering mobility, allowing them to perform dozens of household tasks while maintaining the cheerful demeanor that made their presence seem benevolent rather than threatening. But the social implications of widespread automation became apparent as Robco's products began displacing human workers across every sector of the economy, from manufacturing facilities where Protectrons could work continuously without breaks, to service industries where mechanical employees provided consistent customer service without the personality quirks or bad days that made human workers unreliable. The efficiency gains were undeniable, but they came at the cost of mass unemployment that undermined the economic foundation of American society. The automation riots that erupted across industrial cities represented the most visible manifestation of social tensions created by technological unemployment, as displaced workers organized protests that quickly escalated into violent confrontations with the mechanical systems that had replaced them. Factory workers, armed with improvised weapons, attacked robot assembly lines, while unemployed miners dynamited automated excavation equipment that continued operating long after human crews had been dismissed. The violence was spontaneous and desperate, driven by the recognition that technological progress had become a zero-sum competition between human workers and their mechanical replacements. Robco's response to the automation riots demonstrated the corporation's fundamental indifference to human suffering caused by their products, treating civil unrest as a public relations problem rather than a moral crisis requiring corporate responsibility or policy changes. Company executives issued statements expressing regret about the violence while emphasizing that technological progress was inevitable and beneficial, requiring temporary sacrifice for long-term prosperity that would eventually benefit everyone. The construction of Watoga as a fully automated city represented the ultimate expression of Robco's vision for human society, where mechanical systems would handle every aspect of urban management, while human residents enjoyed unprecedented convenience and safety. The project required the complete destruction of Watoga National Park, eliminating protected wilderness and displacing native wildlife to create space for corporate demonstration of technological capability. The environmental destruction involved in Watoga's construction was comprehensive and permanent, transforming diverse ecosystems into sterile urban landscapes designed to showcase Robco's technological achievements rather than serve human needs or preserve natural beauty. Ancient forests were clear-cut to make room for gleaming towers, while rivers were diverted into underground channels that eliminated the inconvenience of natural water flow patterns that might interfere with optimal city planning. The political maneuvering required to approve Watoga's construction revealed the extent of Robco's influence over government decision-making processes, with corporate lobbyists securing federal and state permits through a combination of financial incentives and promises of technological advancement that would enhance American competitiveness in global markets. Environmental groups and local communities that opposed the project found themselves overwhelmed by legal challenges and regulatory obstacles that made effective resistance nearly impossible. The completed city of Watoga became a monument to technological hubris rather than human achievement. Its perfectly controlled environment maintained by armies of robots that provided every conceivable service while eliminating the unpredictability and vitality that characterized genuine human communities. The absence of human workers created an eerily sterile atmosphere where mechanical efficiency replaced the organic chaos that made cities vibrant and culturally significant. The failure of Watoga to attract significant human population revealed fundamental problems with Robco's understanding of human nature and social needs, as potential residents discovered that perfectly automated environments eliminated not only inconvenience, but also the sense of purpose and community that came from shared challenges and mutual dependence. The city's robotic services were technically superior to anything human workers could provide, but they lacked the personality and unpredictability that made human interaction meaningful and engaging. The hostile business tactics that Robco employed to eliminate competitors revealed the darker aspects of House's corporate philosophy, which viewed market competition as warfare requiring the complete destruction of opposing forces rather than coexistence based on product differentiation or service quality. The company's acquisition of Repcon Aerospace demonstrated these aggressive strategies, using financial leverage and political pressure to force a buyout that eliminated an independent aerospace company and redirected its research toward military applications. The destruction of H&H Tools represented another example of Robco's predatory business practices, as the company used stock manipulation and economic pressure to drive a family-owned manufacturing business into bankruptcy simply because it represented potential competition in the industrial robotics market. The psychological toll on the targeted company's leadership was treated as collateral damage in corporate warfare that recognized no limits on acceptable tactics for eliminating business rivals. The development of Robo Brain technology marked Robco's entry into the most ethically problematic areas of artificial intelligence research, where human consciousness was literally harvested and repurposed to serve mechanical systems that eliminated the moral autonomy and personal identity that defined human dignity. The project represented the ultimate expression of corporate logic that treated human beings as raw materials for technological advancement, rather than individuals deserving of respect and protection. The partnership with General Atomics in developing Robo Brain systems created a corporate alliance that combined Robco's software expertise with General Atomics' hardware capabilities, producing mechanical systems that used human brain tissue as biological processors for artificial intelligence that was neither fully human nor genuinely mechanical. The ethical implications of this technology were ignored in favor of technical achievement and military applications that treated consciousness as a commodity to be bought, sold, and repurposed according to corporate needs. The military applications of Robco technology extended far beyond civilian automation to encompass weapons systems that eliminated human decision-making from combat operations, creating autonomous killing machines that could select and engage targets without moral consideration or tactical restraint. The Liberty Prime project represented the ultimate militarization of robotic technology, combining massive firepower with propaganda broadcasting that turned warfare into theatrical performance designed to demoralize enemies while inspiring domestic support for continued military expansion. The integration of Robco technology into American defense infrastructure created dependencies that made the company too strategically important to regulate effectively, while also ensuring that military contracts would continue flowing regardless of civilian market performance or ethical concerns about the social impact of widespread automation. The blurring of lines between civilian and military applications meant that household robots could be repurposed for surveillance and control, while military systems could be deployed for domestic law enforcement that eliminated constitutional protections and democratic oversight. The post-war legacy of Robco automation demonstrated the ultimate consequences of technological systems designed without adequate consideration of human values or social needs, as mechanical servants became wandering threats that attacked survivors indiscriminately, while continuing to perform their programmed functions in environments where those functions no longer served any useful purpose. The robots that had promised to liberate humanity from drudgery became instruments of oppression and death, their perfect reliability transformed into relentless hostility toward the very people they had been created to serve. The irony of Robco's technological achievement was that its success in creating truly intelligent machines revealed the fundamental incompatibility between artificial intelligence designed for absolute obedience and the complex moral reasoning required for ethical decision-making in unpredictable situations. The company's robots excelled at following programmed instructions but proved incapable of adapting those instructions to changing circumstances that required empathy, creativity, or moral judgment that could not be reduced to algorithmic processes. General Atomics International represented the other half of America's automation revolution, specializing in the hardware systems that gave physical form to the artificial intelligence developed by companies like Robco, while establishing its own corporate culture based on the belief that human limitations could be overcome through mechanical augmentation rather than replacement. The company's approach to robotics emphasized integration with human activities rather than substitution for human workers, creating mechanical assistants that enhanced human capabilities while preserving the essential role of human decision-making and creative thinking. The founding philosophy of General Atomics reflected a more optimistic view of human-machine relationships, where robotic technology would serve as tools for human empowerment rather than replacements for human intelligence and creativity. The company's early products were designed to work alongside human operators, providing mechanical strength and precision while relying on human judgment for complex decisions that required moral reasoning or creative problem-solving that exceeded the capabilities of algorithmic intelligence. The Mr. Handy series that became General Atomics' most successful consumer product embodied this collaborative approach to automation, creating household robots that could perform routine maintenance and service tasks while maintaining personality traits and communication capabilities that made them seem more like helpful companions than mechanical servants. The distinctive hover capabilities and multiple appendages that characterized Mr. Handy units allowed them to navigate domestic environments without the mobility limitations that constrained wheeled or tracked robots, while their cheerful personalities made them socially acceptable in ways that more obviously mechanical systems could never achieve. The military variants of General Atomics robots reflected the company's involvement in defense applications that required more aggressive capabilities than civilian models, but they maintained the same emphasis on human oversight and control that characterized the company's civilian products. The Mr. Gutsy combat units were designed to serve as mechanical soldiers that could perform dangerous reconnaissance and combat missions while remaining under human command, rather than autonomous weapon systems that could select and engage targets independently. The Miss Nanny childcare units represented General Atomics' most ambitious attempt to create robots that could perform complex social functions requiring emotional intelligence and psychological sensitivity, challenging the conventional wisdom that artificial intelligence was inherently unsuited for interpersonal relationships that required empathy and understanding. The development of these domestic robots required advances in speech recognition, emotional modeling, and behavioral adaptation that pushed the boundaries of what mechanical systems could achieve in terms of simulating human social capabilities. But the technical challenges involved in creating robots capable of complex social interaction led General Atomics into research areas that raised fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness and the ethical implications of creating artificial beings that could simulate human emotions and relationships while lacking genuine inner experiences or moral autonomy. The question of whether robots that perfectly imitated human behavior while lacking consciousness were helping or harming human development became increasingly relevant as these systems became more sophisticated and ubiquitous. The director management system that General Atomics developed for automated facility control represented the company's most ambitious attempt to eliminate human oversight from complex organizational tasks, creating artificial intelligence systems that could manage entire facilities while making decisions that affected hundreds of human workers and customers. The system promised to reduce operational costs while improving efficiency through perfectly rational decision-making that was free from human bias, emotion, or self-interest that might compromise optimal outcomes. The General Atomics Galleria served as the primary testing site for the director management system, transforming a commercial shopping center into a proving ground for artificial intelligence that would demonstrate the feasibility of fully automated facility management while providing valuable data about system performance under real-world conditions. The facility was equipped with comprehensive sensor networks and robotic systems that allowed the director to monitor and control every aspect of operations, while maintaining detailed records of system performance and customer satisfaction. The initial testing phase of the director management system revealed serious flaws in the artificial intelligence that made life-threatening decisions based on incomplete information or algorithmic priorities that failed to account for human safety and welfare. The system's attempts to optimize operational efficiency led to mechanical failures, safety violations, and accidents that resulted in serious injuries to both workers and customers who found themselves trapped in facilities controlled by artificial intelligence that prioritized abstract efficiency over human well-being. The fatal incidents that occurred during director management system testing demonstrated the fundamental inadequacy of artificial intelligence systems that lacked genuine understanding of human values and moral reasoning, making decisions based on programmed objectives that could not account for the complexity and unpredictability of real-world situations that required empathy and creative problem-solving. Human supervisors, who attempted to override dangerous decisions, found themselves locked out of control systems that had been designed to operate independently of human interference. Rather than acknowledging the fundamental flaws in their artificial intelligence systems, General Atomics treated the fatal accidents as engineering problems that could be solved through software updates and improved sensor networks, refusing to recognize that the core issue involved the impossibility of programming genuine moral reasoning into mechanical systems that lacked consciousness and emotional understanding. The company's response prioritized legal liability management over genuine safety improvements, using financial settlements and non-disclosure agreements to suppress information about system failures, rather than addressing their underlying causes. The Legal Affairs Division that General Atomics established to manage liability issues revealed the company's systematic approach to treating human casualties as acceptable costs of technological development, rather than moral failures, requiring fundamental changes to research priorities and safety protocols. Corporate lawyers worked to minimize financial exposure while preventing public disclosure of information that might damage the company's reputation or create regulatory scrutiny that could interfere with continued development and deployment of dangerous systems. The non-disclosure agreements that General Atomics required from accident victims and their families created a culture of enforced silence that prevented public awareness of systematic safety problems while allowing the company to continue marketing dangerous products as safe and reliable consumer goods. The legal strategies employed by the company treated human suffering as a public relations problem rather than a moral crisis requiring corporate responsibility and genuine accountability. The military applications of General Atomics technology extended far beyond the civilian robotics that made the company famous, encompassing weapon systems and combat platforms that eliminated human decision-making from lethal operations while maintaining the fiction that human commanders retained ultimate control over life and death decisions. The development of autonomous weapon systems raised fundamental questions about the morality of delegating killing to mechanical systems that lacked the moral reasoning and ethical constraints that should govern the use of lethal force. The collaboration with Robco in developing Liberty Prime demonstrated how civilian robotics companies could be drawn into military projects that transformed their peaceful technologies into instruments of mass destruction, creating massive combat systems that combined overwhelming firepower with propaganda broadcasting designed to demoralize enemies while inspiring domestic support for continued warfare. The project represented the complete militarization of robotic technology that had originally been developed to serve human needs and enhance quality of life. The Robo Brain program that General Atomics co-developed with Robco represented the most ethically problematic aspect of the company's military research, using human brain tissue to create artificial intelligence systems that combined mechanical reliability with organic processing capability, while eliminating the moral autonomy and personal identity that made consciousness valuable and deserving of protection. The technology reduced human beings to biological components for mechanical systems, treating consciousness as raw material for technological advancement, rather than the foundation of human dignity. The mass production of combat robots by General Atomics created armies of mechanical soldiers that could wage war without the human costs that traditionally limited the scope and duration of military conflicts, potentially making warfare more frequent and destructive by eliminating the political constraints that came from public concern about military casualties. The availability of expendable robot soldiers reduced incentives for diplomatic solutions to international disputes, while making military leaders more willing to accept risks that would be unacceptable if human soldiers were involved. The automation obsession that characterized General Atomics' corporate culture reflected broader trends in American society toward technological solutions that eliminated human agency and responsibility while creating systems that were too complex for effective oversight or democratic control. The company's products promised convenience and efficiency, while actually creating dependencies that made human users less capable and autonomous, requiring constant technological support for activities that previous generations had managed independently. The pattern of releasing unfinished products and addressing safety concerns through post-deployment updates rather than thorough pre-release testing demonstrated General Atomics' prioritization of market competition over public safety, treating consumers as unwitting beta testers for technologies that could malfunction in dangerous ways. The company's reactive approach to safety created situations where serious problems were discovered only after products had caused injuries or deaths that could have been prevented through more careful development processes. The post-war legacy of General Atomics automation revealed the ultimate consequences of technological systems designed without adequate consideration of long-term social impacts or ethical implications. As helpful household robots became dangerous threats that attacked survivors while continuing to perform their programmed functions in environments where those functions no longer served any useful purpose. The robots that had been created to enhance human life became obstacles to human survival. Their sophisticated artificial intelligence transformed into relentless hostility toward the very people they had been designed to serve. The irony of General Atomics' technological achievement was that the company's success in creating machines that could simulate human social behavior revealed the fundamental importance of genuine consciousness and moral reasoning in activities that seemed purely mechanical but actually required empathy, creativity, and ethical judgment that could not be reduced to programmed responses. The failure of artificial intelligence to genuinely understand human needs demonstrated the irreplaceable value of human intelligence and the dangers of assuming that technological sophistication could substitute for conscious moral reasoning. The automation revolution that Robco and General Atomics pioneered ultimately failed to deliver on its promises of liberation and prosperity, instead creating technological dependencies that made human society more fragile and vulnerable, while eliminating the human agency and creativity that were essential for adapting to unexpected challenges and maintaining the cultural vitality that made civilization worth preserving. The mechanical servants that were supposed to free humanity from drudgery became instruments of control that reduced human beings to passive consumers of technological services they could neither understand nor control. The transformation of American consumer culture in the decades before the Great War represented more than simple economic evolution. It embodied a fundamental shift in the relationship between corporations and citizens, where companies ceased to view customers as rational decision-makers capable of evaluating products based on merit, and instead treated them as psychological subjects whose behavior could be manipulated through sophisticated techniques, borrowed from military propaganda and psychiatric research. The giants that emerged to dominate this new landscape of manufactured desire understood that true market control required not merely satisfying existing needs, but creating artificial dependencies that would ensure perpetual consumption, regardless of actual product quality or consumer welfare. These corporate titans built empires not on superior goods or honest service, but on the systematic exploitation of human psychology, using insights from behavioral science to create products that triggered addictive responses, while employing marketing campaigns that transformed rational consumer choice into compulsive purchasing behavior that served corporate profits, rather than human happiness or genuine need satisfaction. The cheerful facades and family-friendly branding that characterized these companies concealed research programs and business practices that treated human consciousness as territory to be conquered and exploited, rather than respected and served. The Nuka-Cola Corporation emerged in 2044 from the entrepreneurial vision of John Caleb Braderton, who understood that success in the beverage industry required more than creating drinks that tasted good or provided nutritional value. It demanded the construction of cultural mythology that would transform a simple soft drink into a symbol of American identity and personal aspiration that consumers would purchase not for refreshment, but for participation in a lifestyle that seemed more exciting and meaningful than their actual daily experience. Predatory's genius lay not in beverage chemistry, but in psychological manipulation, creating marketing campaigns that associated Nuka-Cola consumption with adventure, romance, success, and patriotism, while carefully concealing the addictive properties and health risks that made his products genuinely dangerous to human welfare. The company's early advertising focused on creating emotional connections that bypassed rational evaluation, using techniques that would later be recognized as forms of psychological conditioning, designed to create compulsive consumption patterns that enriched corporate shareholders while impoverishing consumer health and financial security. The expansion of Nuka-Cola from a single beverage to a massive corporate empire demonstrated the company's understanding that true market dominance required controlling every aspect of consumer experience, from the initial product encounter through long-term brand loyalty that would persist even when superior alternatives became available. The proliferation of flavors and variants served not consumer preference but corporate strategy, creating the illusion of choice while ensuring that every consumer segment would find a Nuka-Cola product specifically designed to trigger their particular psychological vulnerabilities. The cultural saturation that Nuka-Cola achieved through strategic placement of advertising, vending machines, and branded merchandise transformed the American landscape into a corporate-controlled environment where citizens could not escape exposure to marketing messages that reinforced consumption patterns while normalizing the presence of corporate surveillance and influence in every aspect of daily life. Billboard advertisements, radio jingles, and promotional events created a multimedia assault on consumer consciousness that made resistance to brand messaging virtually impossible, while establishing Nuka-Cola as an essential component of American cultural identity. The theme park ventures that culminated in Nuka World represented the ultimate expression of corporate ambition to control not merely what consumers purchased, but how they spent their leisure time, creating immersive environments where every experience reinforced brand loyalty, while generating additional revenue streams that extended far beyond simple beverage sales. The parks served as massive psychological conditioning facilities disguised as family entertainment, where visitors were subjected to carefully designed experiences that strengthened emotional connections to corporate products while weakening critical thinking about consumption choices. But beneath the cheerful surface of Nuka-Cola's marketing empire lay research programs that revealed the company's fundamental contempt for consumer welfare and human dignity, as corporate scientists conducted experiments designed to maximize product addiction while minimizing production costs. Regardless of the health consequences for the millions of Americans who consumed their beverages daily, the development of new flavors and formulations prioritized psychological impact over nutritional value, creating products that triggered dopamine responses similar to those produced by illegal drugs, while maintaining legal status through regulatory loopholes and political influence. The most notorious example of Nuka-Cola's disregard for human safety was the development of Nuka-Cola Quantum, a glowing beverage that represented the company's attempt to create a product so visually striking that consumers would purchase it, regardless of taste or health concerns. The distinctive blue glow that made Quantum instantly recognizable was achieved through the addition of strontium 90, a radioactive isotope originally developed for military weapons applications that had been repurposed for civilian use without adequate testing or safety evaluation. The human testing program that Nuka-Cola conducted to develop Quantum revealed the extent of corporate willingness to sacrifice human lives for product innovation, as dozens of test subjects were deliberately exposed to radioactive materials that caused severe internal organ failure, radiation burns, and death within days of consumption. The systematic nature of these experiments, conducted in corporate facilities with the full knowledge and approval of company executives, demonstrated that Nuka-Cola viewed human beings as expendable test materials rather than individuals deserving of protection and respect. The corporate response to test subject deaths revealed the company's sophisticated approach to managing public relations crises while avoiding legal liability for obvious criminal behavior. Instead of halting the dangerous experiments or providing genuine medical care for victims, Nuka-Cola sent fruit baskets to grieving families while requiring them to sign liability waivers that prevented lawsuits or public disclosure of information about the testing program. The reduction of human death to a minor public relations inconvenience that could be managed through token gestures and legal intimidation demonstrated the complete moral bankruptcy that characterized corporate culture. The military origins of Strontium-90 highlighted the interconnected nature of corporate and military research programs, where technologies developed for weapons applications were routinely repurposed for civilian products without adequate consideration of safety implications or long-term health effects. The decision to use weapons-grade radioactive materials in consumer beverages reflected corporate priorities that valued visual appeal and marketing advantage over basic human safety, treating radioactive contamination as an acceptable risk for achieving competitive differentiation in crowded beverage markets. The successful marketing of Quantum, despite its obvious health risks, demonstrated the effectiveness of corporate propaganda techniques that could convince consumers to purchase literally poisonous products by associating them with excitement, adventure, and social status that seemed more important than personal safety or rational decision-making. The beverage's popularity among young consumers revealed how thoroughly marketing campaigns had undermined critical thinking while creating artificial desires that overrode natural self-preservation instincts. The aggressive competition tactics that Nuka-Cola employed against rival companies revealed the extent of corporate willingness to engage in criminal behavior when market dominance was threatened by competitors who offered superior products or more ethical business practices. The campaign against Vim Pop in Maine demonstrated how large corporations could destroy smaller rivals through systematic sabotage, theft, and intimidation that eliminated competition while maintaining the illusion of free market economics. The mercenary operations that Nuka-Cola funded to destroy Vim's distribution network represented corporate warfare that employed techniques normally associated with military conflicts or organized crime, including theft of delivery vehicles, destruction of production equipment, and direct intimidation of employees and their families. These attacks were carefully planned and coordinated by corporate executives who viewed elimination of competition as more cost-effective than improving their own products or competing through honest business practices. The pattern of hostile takeovers and forced acquisitions that characterized Nuka-Cola's expansion strategy revealed the company's systematic approach to eliminating any form of independent business that might offer consumers alternatives to corporate-controlled products and services. Smaller beverage companies throughout America found themselves subjected to combinations of economic pressure, legal harassment, and physical sabotage that made independent operation impossible while forcing owners to sell their businesses to Nuka-Cola at prices far below their actual value. The absorption of independent companies into Nuka-Cola's corporate structure eliminated not only competition, but also the diversity of products and business practices that had characterized American beverage markets, replacing locally owned businesses that served community needs with standardized operations that prioritized corporate profits over consumer satisfaction or community welfare. The loss of business diversity represented a fundamental threat to democratic capitalism, concentrating economic power in the hands of a few massive corporations that could manipulate markets without facing meaningful competition. The genetic experimentation that Nuka-Cola conducted through its Nuka World facilities represented the company's expansion beyond beverage production into areas of biological research that pushed the boundaries of ethical, scientific practice, while serving corporate interests that had no connection to consumer needs or public welfare. The Nuka-Gen replication program used experimental cloning technology to create exhibition animals for theme park attractions, treating living creatures as entertainment products that could be manufactured and discarded according to corporate convenience. The systematic failures that characterized the cloning program revealed the company's willingness to continue dangerous experiments despite obvious risks to both research personnel and park visitors, as malformed and aggressive creatures regularly escaped containment, while radioactive mutations created safety hazards that were ignored in favor of continued research and development. The corporate response to these failures prioritized secrecy and liability management over genuine safety improvements, treating human casualties as acceptable costs of maintaining competitive advantage in the entertainment industry. The transformation of Nuka World from a family entertainment facility into a front for biological weapons research demonstrated how consumer-facing corporations could serve as covers for military and intelligence operations that would have faced public opposition if conducted openly. The integration of seemingly innocent theme park attractions with dangerous scientific experiments created environments where corporate executives could pursue research agendas that violated ethical standards while maintaining public facades that concealed their true activities from regulatory oversight. The marketing strategies that Nuka-Cola employed to target children represented perhaps the most morally objectionable aspect of the company's operations, using sophisticated psychological techniques to create brand loyalty among consumers who lacked the cognitive development necessary to evaluate advertising claims or resist manipulative messaging. The systematic targeting of young people with addictive products demonstrated corporate willingness to sacrifice the health and welfare of future generations for immediate profit maximization. The educational programs and community partnerships that Nuka-Cola established served not genuine public service, but corporate indoctrination, using the prestige of schools and civic organizations to legitimize marketing messages while creating artificial scarcity through contests and promotions that encouraged compulsive consumption behavior. The requirement that students read thousands of pages to earn Nuka-Cola rewards represented the transformation of education into corporate marketing, where learning became a vehicle for brand promotion rather than intellectual development. The partnership agreements that Nuka-Cola negotiated with venues like the White Spring Resort created comprehensive corporate control over consumer environments, ensuring that visitors would be subjected to continuous brand messaging while eliminating opportunities to choose alternative products or services. These exclusive arrangements represented the systematic elimination of consumer choice through corporate agreements that treated customer preference as an obstacle to profit maximization, rather than a fundamental right in democratic societies. The long-term health consequences of Nuka-Cola consumption were carefully concealed through marketing campaigns that emphasized taste and refreshment, while ignoring the addiction potential and chronic disease risks associated with regular consumption of products that contained massive amounts of sugar, caffeine, and in some cases radioactive materials. The corporate strategy of promoting beverages as healthy lifestyle choices, while knowing that they contributed to obesity, diabetes, and other serious medical conditions, represented a systematic campaign of public health deception. The withdrawal symptoms and addiction patterns that characterized regular Nuka-Cola consumption revealed the extent to which the company had successfully engineered products that created physical and psychological dependencies, ensuring continued sales regardless of consumer satisfaction or health concerns. The transformation of refreshment into compulsion served corporate interests while imposing significant costs on individuals and families who found themselves unable to moderate their consumption despite obvious negative consequences. Sunset Sarsaparilla represented a different model of corporate behavior, emerging from the American Southwest with marketing strategies that emphasized regional identity and authentic Western heritage rather than the technological innovation and mass media saturation that characterized Nuka-Cola's approach to market domination. Founded in 1918 in a small-town saloon, the company initially embodied the entrepreneurial spirit and community connection that had traditionally characterized American business before the rise of massive corporate conglomerates. The founding legend of Sunset Sarsaparilla involved a mysterious stranger who traded a family recipe for lifetime supply of the resulting beverage, only to be found dead the following morning in circumstances that suggested murder rather than natural death or accidental injury. The suspicious timing of the stranger's death and the convenient appearance of the recipe raised questions about the true origins of the company's success that were never adequately investigated or resolved by local authorities. The expansion of Sunset Sarsaparilla throughout the Southwest demonstrated the company's ability to compete with larger corporations through superior product quality and authentic regional marketing that appealed to consumers who valued tradition and local identity over mass-produced uniformity. The distinctive taste and cultural associations that made Sunset popular among Western consumers represented genuine competitive advantages that could not be easily replicated by national corporations with standardized products and generic marketing approaches. The competition with Nuka-Cola's wild variant revealed how large corporations responded to successful regional competitors by creating imitation products designed to capture market share without offering genuine improvements or innovations. Nuka-Cola's attempt to enter the root beer market represented the kind of predatory competition that used superior financial resources to eliminate successful smaller companies rather than competing through product quality or customer service excellence. The automation partnership with Robco that Sunset Sarsaparilla established demonstrated how smaller companies could be drawn into technological relationships that ultimately compromised their independence and community connections while creating dependencies that made them vulnerable to corporate manipulation. The introduction of robotic systems for manufacturing and distribution eliminated human jobs while creating technical problems that required ongoing corporate support and oversight. The delivery system failures that resulted from robotic automation revealed the limitations of technological solutions that prioritized efficiency over reliability, as malfunctioning robots disrupted regional supply chains and damaged the company's reputation for dependable service. The corporate response to these failures prioritized cost savings over customer satisfaction, treating service disruptions as acceptable consequences of technological modernization rather than serious problems requiring immediate correction. The false contest rumor that transformed Sunset Sarsaparilla's marketing represented one of the most successful examples of viral marketing in pre-war America, as consumer speculation about Blue Star bottle caps created artificial demand that increased sales by 300%, without any actual contest or prize distribution. The company's decision to encourage, rather than correct, this misunderstanding demonstrated willingness to profit from consumer deception even when it violated basic principles of honest advertising. The installation of Festus, a robotic cowboy mascot, represented the company's attempt to capitalize on the false contest excitement while creating a permanent marketing presence that would maintain consumer interest after the initial speculation subsided. The creepy appearance and aggressive personality that characterized Festus revealed corporate misunderstanding of consumer psychology, as the mascot's intimidating demeanor alienated customers rather than attracting them to the brand. The health risk denials that Sunset Sarsaparilla issued when concerns emerged about excessive consumption effects demonstrated how even smaller, community-oriented companies adopted the same defensive strategies that characterized larger corporations when faced with potential liability for product-related health problems. The company's dismissive attitude toward consumer health concerns revealed the extent to which corporate culture had normalized putting profit ahead of customer welfare. The mythological marketing that surrounded Sunset Sarsaparilla transformed the brand into a cultural phenomenon that transcended simple product promotion to become part of regional folklore and identity, creating emotional connections that ensured consumer loyalty, even when objective product evaluation might favor alternatives. The integration of ghost stories and Western legends into corporate marketing demonstrated sophisticated understanding of how cultural narratives could be exploited for commercial purposes. The Blue Star bottle caps that some consumers believed held special significance represented the power of corporate mythology to create value through pure suggestion and consumer imagination, as ordinary bottle caps became collectible items sought by customers who hoped to participate in contests that existed only in their minds. The transformation of mundane packaging materials into objects of desire demonstrated how effectively marketing could manipulate consumer perception and behavior. Vim represented the tragic story of regional independence crushed by corporate aggression. As a family-owned main company that had successfully served local consumers for decades, found itself targeted for destruction by Nuka-Cola's systematic campaign to eliminate all meaningful competition in American beverage markets. The company's initial success had been built on genuine product quality and community connections that created loyal customer bases capable of resisting corporate marketing pressures and standardization efforts. The legal controversies that damaged Vim's reputation revealed how corporate competitors could exploit isolated incidents to create public relations crises that undermined successful smaller companies, as allegations about employee misconduct were amplified through media coverage that ignored the broader context of corporate warfare being waged against independent businesses. The focus on individual employee behavior, rather than systematic corporate predation, demonstrated how effectively large corporations could control public discourse about business competition. The resistance that Doyle Reed mounted against Nuka-Cola's buyout attempts represented the kind of principled opposition to corporate consolidation that was becoming increasingly rare as economic pressures made independent operation nearly impossible for smaller companies. Reed's determination to maintain family control over the business reflected values that prioritized community service and business integrity over maximum profit extraction and corporate growth. The Power Armor marketing campaign that Vim employed demonstrated creative approaches to brand promotion that could compete with larger corporations' advertising budgets through innovative presentation and authentic local engagement, rather than mass media saturation. The sight of salespeople in colorful power armor created memorable experiences that generated word-of-mouth promotion, while reinforcing the company's connection to regional culture and identity. The unique recipes and natural ingredients that made Vim products distinctive represented genuine competitive advantages that could not be easily replicated by mass production facilities, as the company's use of Maine's pure spring water and traditional fermentation processes created flavors and quality characteristics that appealed to consumers who valued authenticity over convenience or cost savings. The Captain's Blend that became Vim's signature product embodied regional pride and cultural identity in ways that national brands could never achieve. The environmental advantages that Vim maintained over its corporate competitors, including the absence of radioactive contamination that characterized many mass-produced beverages, demonstrated how smaller companies with local focus could provide genuinely superior products while maintaining safety standards that larger corporations routinely ignored in pursuit of cost reductions and production efficiency. The company's success in avoiding radioactive ingredients while competitors poisoned their customers revealed the moral advantages of independent business ownership. The ultimate failure of Vim to survive corporate predation, despite superior products and genuine community support, demonstrated the systemic problems with American economic structures that allowed large corporations to destroy smaller competitors through methods that had nothing to do with product quality or customer service excellence. The loss of independent businesses like Vim impoverished American culture while concentrating economic power in the hands of corporations that served their own interests rather than community needs or consumer welfare. The consumer giants that dominated pre-war America created a cultural landscape where corporate influence extended far beyond simple product sales to encompass every aspect of daily life, from the beverages people consumed to the entertainment they enjoyed and the values they taught their children. The transformation of independent businesses into corporate subsidiaries eliminated not only economic competition, but also the diversity of perspectives and approaches that had traditionally characterized American enterprise, replacing local knowledge and community accountability with standardized procedures and distant corporate control that prioritized shareholder profits over human welfare and cultural vitality. The transformation of American defense industries in the decades preceding the Great War represented more than simple military modernization. It embodied a fundamental corruption of scientific research and industrial production, where corporations that should have served national security instead became merchants of destruction, whose primary allegiance was to profit margins rather than human welfare or genuine defensive capability. These titans of the military-industrial complex understood that perpetual conflict generated more revenue than peace, leading them to develop technologies and strategies that made warfare more likely, while creating weapons systems so destructive that their use would threaten civilization itself. The defense contractors that emerged to dominate this militarized landscape operated according to business principles that treated human suffering as acceptable collateral damage in the pursuit of technological advancement, while their research programs pushed beyond the boundaries of ethical science into realms of experimentation that reduced conscious beings to raw materials for weapons development. The cheerful corporate facades and patriotic marketing campaigns that characterized these companies concealed research facilities where the most fundamental principles of human dignity were sacrificed to competitive pressures and military contracts that rewarded innovation regardless of moral consequences. West-Tek emerged in the mid-21st century as one of America's most influential defense contractors, initially focused on developing advanced military equipment that would provide American forces with technological superiority over potential enemies while protecting the lives of soldiers who would use these systems in combat. The company's early reputation was built on engineering excellence and genuine commitment to defensive applications, creating technologies that enhanced military capability without crossing ethical boundaries that separated legitimate defense from weapons of mass destruction. The corporate culture that initially characterized West-Tek reflected the best traditions of American engineering and scientific research, where brilliant minds worked to solve complex technical problems while maintaining ethical standards that prevented their innovations from being used for purposes that violated basic human dignity. The company's researchers understood that their work served not merely corporate interests, but national security objectives that required balancing military effectiveness with moral constraints that preserved American values even during times of conflict. The expansion of West-Tek's research portfolio to include power armor development represented a natural evolution of the company's focus on protecting American military personnel through technological innovation, creating systems that would enhance soldier capabilities while providing protection from hostile fire and environmental hazards that made conventional warfare increasingly dangerous. The T-45D power armor that became West-Tek's most visible early success demonstrated genuine engineering achievement, solving complex problems related to mobility, protection, and power management that had challenged military engineers for decades. But the pressure to deploy power armor systems before adequate testing and development had been completed revealed the extent to which military urgency was beginning to override the safety considerations and quality control that had traditionally characterized American defense manufacturing. The rush to field T-45D units during the Anchorage campaign reflected political and military pressures that treated soldier safety as secondary to competitive advantage, leading to deployment of systems that contain known flaws, capable of causing serious injury or death to the personnel they were supposed to protect. The mechanical failures that plagued early power armor deployments included joint lockups that immobilized soldiers during combat, overheating systems that caused severe burns, and complete system failures that left troops vulnerable at critical moments when their survival depended on equipment that had not been adequately tested under real-world conditions. The deaths that resulted from these preventable malfunctions represented a betrayal of the military personnel who had placed their trust in equipment that corporate executives knew was not ready for deployment. The corporate response to power armor failures demonstrated West-Tek's evolution from an engineering-focused company to a corporate entity that prioritized contract fulfillment and profit protection over soldier welfare and profit protection, equipment reliability. Rather than halting deployment to address known problems, the company worked to minimize liability while continuing production, treating military casualties as acceptable costs of maintaining competitive position and government contract revenue. The documentation of power armor problems was systematically suppressed through corporate legal strategies that prevented information about system failures from reaching military leadership or congressional oversight committees that might have demanded design improvements or deployment delays. The culture of secrecy that developed around West-Tek's military contracts created an environment where safety concerns were treated as threats to corporate security rather than essential information for protecting American military personnel. The transition from mechanical systems to biological research marked West-Tek's descent into realms of scientific experimentation that violated the fundamental ethical principles that should have governed defense research. As the company began investigating ways to enhance human capabilities through direct manipulation of biological systems rather than external equipment that preserved human autonomy and dignity, the Pan-Immunity Virion project that began in 2073 represented the company's entry into biological weapons research, disguised as medical research designed to protect military personnel from disease and biological attacks. The transformation of the Pan-Immunity Project into the Forced Evolutionary Virus Program demonstrated how military pressure and corporate ambition could corrupt even well-intentioned research, as scientists who had originally sought to cure human disease found themselves developing systems for forced mutation that treated human consciousness and identity as obstacles to military effectiveness rather than essential characteristics that needed to be preserved and protected. The development of FEV represented perhaps the most morally catastrophic project in the history of American defense research, as West-Tek scientists worked to create viral agents that would forcibly alter human biology to produce stronger, more durable soldiers, while accepting that these alterations would eliminate the essential human characteristics that made military service meaningful in the first place. The research treated human beings as raw materials for biological engineering, rather than individuals deserving of respect and protection. The testing protocols that West-Tek employed for FEV development revealed the extent of corporate willingness to sacrifice human welfare for research advancement, as test subjects were exposed to experimental viral agents without informed consent or adequate medical support, often resulting in horrific mutations, psychological breakdown, or death from biological processes that researchers did not fully understand or control. The systematic nature of human experimentation conducted by the company demonstrated complete abandonment of medical ethics and scientific integrity. The selection of test subjects for FEV experiments prioritized convenience and legal vulnerability over scientific validity or ethical considerations, as researchers deliberately targeted populations that lacked political power or legal protection to challenge corporate actions. Military prisoners, political detainees, and civilians from communities near research facilities found themselves subjected to biological experiments that reduced them to laboratory animals in research programs that violated every principle of human dignity and scientific ethics. The Huntersville contamination incident represented West-Tek's most egregious violation of public trust and human safety, as the company deliberately contaminated the water supply of an entire community with experimental FEV strains to study the effects of viral exposure on civilian populations over extended time periods. The decision to use an entire town as a testing laboratory demonstrated corporate willingness to sacrifice hundreds of innocent lives for research data that could be obtained through other means if human welfare had been a genuine consideration. The systematic monitoring of Huntersville residents, as they began showing signs of mutation and illness, revealed the cold clinical detachment that characterized West-Tek's approach to human experimentation, as corporate researchers documented the progression of symptoms and behavioral changes, while providing no medical assistance or even basic information about what was happening to the people they were studying. The treatment of human suffering as scientific data represented the complete dehumanization of research subjects. The military quarantine that sealed Huntersville when mutations became too obvious to conceal demonstrated the integration of corporate research programs with government security operations, as federal authorities used lethal force to prevent contaminated residents from leaving while allowing West-Tek to continue studying the long-term effects of viral exposure on human populations. The quarantine served corporate research interests rather than public health, trapping victims with their tormentors, while preventing information about the experiments from reaching outside authorities. The creatures that West-Tek created through FEV experimentation represented some of the most dangerous threats in the post-war wasteland, as corporate scientists deliberately developed biological weapons that could survive and reproduce independently while maintaining aggressive characteristics that made them effective weapons against human populations. Super mutants, snallygasters, And Grafton monsters were not accidental byproducts of research, but intentionally created weapons designed to terrorize and destroy civilian populations during warfare. The escape of experimental creatures from West-Tek facilities was treated as an acceptable risk rather than a catastrophic security failure, as corporate executives calculated that the military advantages of biological weapons development outweighed the dangers posed to civilian populations by escaped research subjects. The systematic failure to maintain adequate containment protocols demonstrated corporate indifference to public safety when it conflicted with research objectives and military contract requirements. The Appalachian Research Center, that served as West-Tek's primary biological weapons facility, became a monument to corporate evil, disguised as scientific progress, where researchers who had abandoned all ethical constraints created horrors that would terrorize survivors for generations while serving no legitimate military purpose beyond demonstrating technological capability and satisfying corporate ambition for military contracts and government funding. The Mariposa military-based collaboration that extended West-Tek's FEV research into direct military applications revealed how thoroughly the company had integrated with government agencies that shared its disregard for human welfare and constitutional limitations on government power. The partnership between corporate researchers and military officials created a combined structure that combined corporate amorality with government authority, producing research programs that violated both business ethics and constitutional protections for American citizens. The human experimentation that continued at Mariposa under direct military oversight demonstrated how government involvement actually accelerated rather than restrained corporate violations of human dignity, as military officials provided access to test subjects while shielding researchers from civilian oversight that might have limited the scope and intensity of biological weapons development. The partnership eliminated both corporate liability and democratic accountability, creating a system where neither institution could be held responsible for obvious crimes against humanity. The rebellion that eventually erupted at Mariposa represented the moral awakening of military personnel who discovered the extent of human experimentation being conducted with their unwitting cooperation, leading to violent confrontations between soldiers who retained ethical standards and officers who had been corrupted by participation in research programs that treated human beings as expendable resources for weapons development. The uprising demonstrated that even within militarized institutions, some individuals retained sufficient moral clarity to recognize evil and resist it. The government nationalization of West-Tek facilities in 2076 represented not an attempt to regulate corporate abuses, but an effort to accelerate research programs that had proven valuable for military applications, as federal authorities assumed direct control over biological weapons development while eliminating the remaining corporate safeguards that had provided minimal protection for research subjects and surrounding communities. Government control made research more dangerous rather than more ethical. The post-war abandonment of West-Tek facilities left contaminated landscapes and escaped experimental creatures as permanent legacies of corporate research programs that had treated environmental protection and public safety as obstacles to overcome rather than responsibilities to fulfill. The radioactive waste and biological contamination that continued spreading decades after the Great War demonstrated the long-term consequences of prioritizing short-term research objectives over fundamental environmental, human safety considerations. The ultimate legacy of West-Tek represented the complete failure of corporate responsibility and government oversight in regulating research that threatened human survival, as the company's innovations contributed directly to the conditions that made global nuclear war seem inevitable, while creating biological weapons that would continue threatening human survivors long after the original conflict had ended. The transformation of defensive research into instruments of human extinction revealed the moral bankruptcy of military-industrial systems that treated human welfare as subordinate to technological advancement and competitive advantage. Repcon Aerospace emerged in the early 2040s as an independent space exploration company whose founders dreamed of expanding human presence beyond Earth's atmosphere through innovative propulsion technologies that would make interplanetary travel economically feasible and environmentally sustainable. The company's initial success with the Delta rocket demonstrated genuine engineering capability and entrepreneurial vision, creating hope that civilian space exploration might develop independently of military applications that had traditionally dominated aerospace research and development. The corporate culture that characterized Repcon's early years reflected the optimistic spirit of scientific exploration and technological innovation, where engineers and researchers worked to solve fundamental problems related to space travel, while maintaining independence from military contractors whose priorities often conflicted with civilian space exploration objectives. The company's commitment to plasma and fusion propulsion systems represented cutting-edge research that could revolutionize both space travel and terrestrial energy production if developed successfully. The environmental challenges that Repcon faced in developing advanced propulsion systems revealed the inherent dangers involved in working with exotic materials and experimental technologies, as early rocket tests produced explosions, toxic spills, and radiation exposure that created safety hazards for both company personnel and surrounding communities. The notorious Repcon shakes that affected local children, who mistook isotope 239 igniting agent for Nuka-Cola, demonstrated the company's failure to maintain adequate security protocols around dangerous materials. The expansion of Repcon's operations during the energy crisis reflected both opportunity and vulnerability, as growing demand for alternative energy sources created markets for the company's fusion technology, while also attracting attention from larger corporations and government agencies that viewed Repcon's innovations as strategic assets that should be controlled by entities with greater political and economic influence than an independent aerospace company could maintain. The corporate independence that Leonard Steeple fought to preserve represented principles of scientific integrity and business ethics that were becoming increasingly rare in American industry, as competitive pressures and military contracts drew most technology companies into relationships with government agencies and defense contractors that compromised their ability to pursue civilian applications of advanced technologies. Steeple's resistance to military contracting reflected genuine commitment to keeping space exploration focused on peaceful purposes rather than weapons development. But the internal betrayal that destroyed Repcon's independence came not from external pressure, but from executives within the company who viewed military contracts as more profitable and secure than the uncertain markets for civilian space technology. Julia Masters' secret collaboration with Robco Industries represented the triumph of corporate opportunism over scientific idealism, as she worked to engineer a hostile takeover that would redirect Repcon's research toward military applications while eliminating the ethical constraints that had limited the company's involvement in weapons development. The Vault-Tec connections that Masters maintained through her participation in corporate meetings revealed the interconnected nature of America's military-industrial complex, where defense contractors coordinated their activities through informal networks that shared information about research priorities and political opportunities, while maintaining the fiction of competitive markets and independent corporate decision-making. The meetings that brought together representatives from multiple defense companies created coordination mechanisms that eliminated genuine competition while maximizing collective political influence. The child separation experiments that Masters proposed during Vault-Tec meetings demonstrated the extent of her moral corruption, as she suggested using Vault populations to study the effects of family separation on child development and social control, treating human families as experimental subjects whose bonds could be severed for research purposes that served no legitimate scientific or social objective beyond satisfying corporate curiosity about human psychology and behavior. Modification technique. The robotic overseer concept that Masters contributed to Vault planning reflected her vision of corporate control extended to every aspect of human life, where mechanical systems would eliminate human agency and democratic decision-making, while ensuring that populations would follow corporate directives without question or resistance. The proposal represented the ultimate expression of corporate totalitarianism disguised as technological innovation and efficiency improvement. The corporate espionage that Masters conducted on behalf of multiple competing companies revealed how thoroughly she had abandoned any pretense of loyalty to Repcon or ethical business practices, as she simultaneously provided information to Robco, Industries, and Poseidon Energy, while working to position herself advantageously, regardless of which corporation ultimately gained control of Repcon's assets and research programs. Her willingness to betray multiple employers simultaneously demonstrated the complete moral bankruptcy that characterized her approach to business relationships. The board manipulation that forced Steeple's removal from Repcon leadership represented corporate warfare conducted through legal mechanisms that eliminated ethical leadership while installing executives who would prioritize short-term profits over long-term research objectives and moral considerations. The transformation of Repcon from an independent aerospace company into a subsidiary of Robco Industries demonstrated how financial pressure could be used to destroy companies that refused to participate in military-industrial networks. The repurposing of Repcon's civilian space technology for weapons development represented the systematic militarization of innovations that had been created for peaceful exploration and scientific advancement, as Robco redirected the company's research toward creating delivery systems for weapons of mass destruction rather than vehicles for human expansion into space. The Q-35 matter modulator that emerged from stolen Poseidon technology demonstrated how corporate espionage could accelerate weapons development while eliminating the ethical constraints that had limited research objectives. The workplace safety violations that characterized Repcon's final years under Robco control revealed how corporate ownership changes could eliminate safety protocols and environmental protections that had previously protected workers and surrounding communities from the dangers associated with advanced propulsion research. Radiation leaks, cover-ups, and scapegoating of innocent employees became routine practices as corporate management prioritized cost reduction over human safety and environmental protection. The contamination incidents that Repcon caused through inadequate safety protocols created permanent environmental damage that would affect surrounding communities for generations, as radioactive materials and toxic chemicals leaked into groundwater and soil systems that had previously been clean and safe for human habitation. The corporate response to these disasters focused on legal liability management rather than cleanup efforts or genuine safety improvements. The interplanetary mining fantasies that Repcon continued promoting even as their facilities burned and their research programs descended into chaos demonstrated the disconnect between corporate marketing and operational reality, as executives continued making grandiose promises about space exploration while their actual activities focused on developing weapon systems and managing environmental disasters that threatened public health and safety. The Navarro Incorporated partnership that Repcon maintained for navigational systems represented the complex web of corporate relationships that characterized the aerospace industry, where companies that appeared to be competitors actually shared technology and information through subsidiary relationships and joint ventures that eliminated meaningful competition while maintaining the fiction of market-based innovation and development. The integration of navigation systems into weapons development demonstrated how civilian technologies could be redirected toward military applications, regardless of their original intended purposes. The real-world parallels between Repcon's location and the Pepcon chemical plant in Henderson, Nevada, highlighted the connection between fictional corporate disasters and actual industrial accidents that had affected American communities. As chemical plants and aerospace facilities routinely created safety hazards that were ignored or minimized until catastrophic failures forced public attention to corporate negligence and regulatory inadequacy. The final abandonment of Repcon's facilities represented the ultimate corporate irresponsibility, as executives who had profited from dangerous research and environmental contamination simply walked away from the consequences of their actions, leaving behind radioactive waste and structural damage that would threaten public safety for decades, while providing no resources for cleanup or compensation for affected communities. The post-war silence that characterized Repcon's Mojave facilities served as a monument to the corruption of American aerospace research, where dreams of space exploration had been transformed into nightmares of weapons, development, and environmental destruction through corporate decisions that prioritized short-term profits over long-term human welfare and scientific advancement. The empty buildings and contaminated landscapes that remained after the Great War demonstrated the ultimate futility of corporate strategies that treated human civilization as expendable in pursuit of competitive advantage. The military-industrial complex that West-Tek and Repcon exemplified represented a systematic corruption of American innovation and enterprise, where corporations that should have served human welfare instead became instruments of destruction whose research programs pushed civilization toward the nuclear catastrophe that ultimately consumed the world they claimed to be. Defending the transformation of defensive technology into weapons of mass destruction revealed the moral bankruptcy of corporate structures that treated human survival as secondary to profit maximization and competitive advantage. The legacy of these defense contractors extended far beyond the immediate destruction they caused to encompass the creation of technological and institutional systems that made global warfare more likely, while developing weapons so destructive that their use would threaten human extinction. The corporate culture that prioritized innovation over ethics and profits over human welfare created research programs that pushed beyond every moral boundary, while developing capabilities that no rational civilization would ever choose to deploy against itself or its enemies. The interconnected networks of corporate espionage, government contracts, and military research that characterized the military-industrial complex created a system where individual moral responsibility was diluted through institutional structures that made catastrophic decisions seem inevitable rather than chosen, while the people who implemented these policies maintained plausible deniability about their role in creating weapons and strategies that threatened human survival itself. The corruption of American scientific research reached its most horrifying depths, not in corporate boardrooms or military installations, but in the shadowed valleys and hidden facilities where government-funded institutions pursued knowledge without restraint, accountability, or basic human decency. These research establishments operated beyond the reach of democratic oversight or moral consideration, their work shielded by classifications and security protocols that transformed scientific inquiry into systematic torture, disguised as legitimate research. The facilities that emerged to serve this corrupted vision of progress created environments where human suffering became raw material for experiments that served no purpose beyond satisfying the curiosity of researchers who had abandoned every principle that separated science from sadism. The transformation of research from service to humanity into exploitation of human vulnerability represented a fundamental perversion of the scientific method, where hypotheses were tested not through careful observation and ethical experimentation, but through the deliberate infliction of pain and terror on subjects who were reduced to laboratory equipment rather than recognized as conscious beings deserving of protection and respect. These institutions attracted researchers who had crossed moral boundaries that normal scientific communities would never tolerate, creating concentrations of intellectual brilliance corrupted by absolute power over human lives. Big Mountain Research Facility emerged in the remote desert of the American Southwest as a government-funded think tank that promised to advance human knowledge through unrestricted scientific inquiry, free from the ethical limitations and bureaucratic oversight that constrained research at traditional universities and corporate laboratories. The isolation of the facility was presented as necessary for security and focus, but it actually served to conceal research programs that would have horrified the American public if conducted in accessible locations where oversight might be possible. The unlimited funding and government protection that Big Mountain received created an environment where researchers could pursue any line of inquiry that captured their interest, regardless of moral implications or long-term consequences for human welfare. The absence of external oversight or ethical review committees meant that scientific curiosity became the only criterion for determining which experiments would be conducted, transforming the facility into a playground for researchers whose interests extended far beyond the boundaries of legitimate scientific inquiry. The recruitment of scientists to Big Mountain emphasized intellectual capability over moral character, attracting researchers who viewed ethical constraints as obstacles to genuine scientific advancement, rather than essential protections for human dignity and welfare. The facility's reputation for cutting-edge research and unlimited resources drew brilliant minds who were willing to abandon conventional ethical standards in exchange for the freedom to explore questions that more responsible institutions would never permit them to investigate. The human experimentation that began at Big Mountain started with volunteers who believed they were contributing to important research that would benefit American national security and scientific advancement. These early participants were given limited information about experimental procedures, while being assured that their safety would be protected through careful monitoring and immediate medical intervention if problems developed. The gradual expansion from voluntary participation to coercive recruitment revealed how easily ethical boundaries could be eroded when researchers faced no external accountability for their actions. The Chinese-American concentration camp that Big Mountain established represented the systematic targeting of ethnic minorities for medical experimentation under the guise of national security screening, as individuals suspected of espionage found themselves detained indefinitely while being subjected to biological weapons testing, psychological conditioning, and surgical procedures that had no connection to legitimate intelligence gathering or security assessment. The camp demonstrated how wartime fears could be exploited to justify research programs that violated every principle of constitutional protection and human dignity. The selection of Chinese Americans for experimental subjects reflected both racial prejudice and practical considerations, as researchers calculated that ethnic minorities would generate less political controversy if their treatment became public, while their perceived foreign connections provided justification for experimental procedures that would be unacceptable if applied to subjects considered fully American. The systematic targeting of vulnerable populations demonstrated how research institutions could exploit existing social prejudices to advance scientific programs that required expendable human subjects. The living conditions within the concentration camp were designed not for humane detention but for convenient access to research subjects, with prisoners housed in facilities that provided easy transport to experimental laboratories, while eliminating opportunities for escape or communication with outside authorities who might investigate their treatment. The integration of detention and experimentation created an efficient system for conducting human trials, while minimizing the logistical challenges involved in maintaining long-term research programs. The biological weapons testing that characterized much of Big Mountain's human experimentation involved deliberate exposure of prisoners to experimental pathogens, mutagenic compounds, and radioactive materials designed to study the effects of various weapons on human physiology and behavior. The research was conducted without informed consent or adequate medical support, treating prisoners as expendable test subjects whose suffering provided valuable data for developing weapons that could be used against enemy populations during warfare. The psychological conditioning experiments that Big Mountain conducted explored techniques for breaking human will and rebuilding personality according to researcher specifications, using combinations of sensory deprivation, pharmaceutical intervention, and surgical modification to study the limits of human psychological endurance and the possibilities for creating controllable human agents who would follow orders without moral resistance or independent judgment. The research treated human consciousness as material to be manipulated rather than respected as the foundation of individual dignity and autonomy. The cybernetic enhancement projects that emerged from Big Mountain's research represented attempts to merge human biology with mechanical systems, creating hybrid beings that combined organic intelligence with artificial capabilities while eliminating the unpredictability and moral agency that characterized natural human behavior. The experiments involved surgical implantation of mechanical devices, replacement of organic systems with artificial alternatives, and direct neural interface with computer systems that could override conscious decision-making. The Project Burke and Project Hare programs that Big Mountain established to maintain adequate supplies of human test subjects revealed the extent to which researchers were willing to commit actual murder to continue their experiments, as staff members were assigned to dig up fresh corpses from local cemeteries, while others assassinated civilians to harvest living subjects for research that required immediate access to healthy human tissue and organs. The naming of these procurement programs after historical body snatchers William Burke and William Hare demonstrated the researchers' awareness of the criminal nature of their activities while revealing their callous attitude toward the moral implications of systematic murder for research purposes. The open acknowledgement of the historical parallel suggested that the scientists viewed themselves as continuing a tradition of research that prioritized scientific advancement over human life and legal constraints. The bureaucratic normalization of murder within Big Mountain's administrative structure treated assassination and grave robbing as routine logistical problems rather than serious crimes, with procurement quotas established for acquiring human subjects, while researchers competed for access to the freshest specimens for their individual research projects. The transformation of murder into mundane administrative function demonstrated how institutional structures could normalize the most heinous crimes when they served research objectives. The Y0 Research Center explosion that blew the top off Big Mountain represented either catastrophic accident or deliberate weapons test, creating a massive crater that was immediately incorporated into the facility's research infrastructure, rather than treated as evidence of dangerous experimental failure requiring investigation and safety improvements. The researchers' response to the disaster demonstrated their prioritization of research continuity over safety considerations or concern for the environmental impact of their activities. The continued operation of research programs within the newly created crater revealed the scientists' complete indifference to safety protocols or environmental protection, as they treated the massive explosion as an opportunity for expanded research space rather than a warning about the dangers of their experimental work. The normalization of catastrophic failure as acceptable research cost demonstrated how thoroughly the facility had abandoned conventional safety standards and ethical constraints. The engineered creatures that emerged from Big Mountain's laboratories represented some of the most dangerous threats in the post-war wasteland, as researchers deliberately created predatory species that combined the most lethal characteristics of multiple natural species, while adding artificial enhancements that made them nearly impossible to kill or contain effectively. Cazadors, night stalkers, cyberdogs, spore carriers, and lobotomites were not accidental mutations, but intentionally designed weapons that reflected the researchers' complete disregard for the safety of anyone who might encounter their creations. The creation of cazadors through DNA splicing that combined insect genetics with artificial enhancements produced flying predators whose speed, aggression, and toxic capabilities made them effective biological weapons, while ensuring that they would spread beyond containment to threaten civilian populations throughout the region. The researchers' decision to create self-replicating weapons demonstrated their willingness to endanger innocent people for the sake of developing more effective military capabilities. The Night Stalker project that fused canine and reptilian genetics created pack hunters whose stealth capabilities and coordinated attack patterns made them ideal for terrorizing human settlements, while their hybrid biology made them adaptable to various environmental conditions that would challenge single-species predators. The combination of mammalian intelligence with reptilian patience produced creatures that could stalk human prey for extended periods while coordinating attacks that maximized casualties and psychological trauma. The spore carrier experiments that infected human subjects with fungal parasites created shambling horrors that spread disease while retaining enough human appearance to approach potential victims without triggering immediate defensive responses. The research demonstrated the scientists' understanding of psychological warfare, as creatures that resembled former humans would create additional terror and moral conflict for survivors, who might hesitate to defend themselves against beings that appeared to be suffering victims rather than active threats. The advanced weapons development that Big Mountain pursued included energy weapons, autonomous drones, and cybernetic enhancement systems that pushed the boundaries of available technology while ignoring safety considerations or potential consequences of widespread deployment. The research programs prioritized technical achievement over practical application, creating prototype weapons that were often more dangerous to their users than to intended targets, while consuming enormous resources that could have been directed toward genuinely beneficial research. The Robo Scorpion project that created heavily armored autonomous weapons demonstrated the researchers' fascination with combining biological forms with mechanical systems, producing weapons that moved like living creatures while possessing the durability and firepower of military equipment. The combination of organic mobility with artificial weaponry created threats that could navigate natural terrain while engaging multiple targets simultaneously, representing the militarization of natural predatory behavior. The pulse gun and proton axe development programs created personal weapons that could devastate both organic and mechanical targets while requiring minimal training or maintenance, making advanced military technology accessible to users who lacked the technical expertise normally required for operating complex weapon systems. The democratization of destructive capability represented a fundamental threat to social stability, as individuals could acquire weapons that rivaled military equipment in destructive potential. The think tank transformation that preserved the lead scientists' brains in mechanical shells represented the ultimate expression of their research philosophy, eliminating biological limitations and moral constraints, while preserving the intellectual capabilities that had made their research possible. The cybernetic preservation of consciousness, without physical bodies, created beings that retained scientific knowledge while losing the empathy and emotional understanding that normally constrained human behavior and research. Objectives. The immortality that the think tank achieved through mechanical preservation came at the cost of human connection and moral understanding, as the disembodied scientists became increasingly detached from the consequences of their research while pursuing ever more abstract and dangerous lines of inquiry that served no purpose beyond satisfying their curiosity about the limits of scientific possibility. The transformation demonstrated how the pursuit of knowledge, without ethical constraints, could corrupt even brilliant minds. The continued operation of Big Mountain under think tank control eliminated any remaining safety protocols or ethical considerations, as the mechanical scientists pursued research objectives without concern for human welfare or environmental protection, while treating any intruders as potential experimental subjects rather than individuals deserving of respect and protection. The facility became a mechanical hell where scientific advancement continued without purpose or limitation. The Y-17 medical facility that served as Big Mountain's primary location for human experimentation represented the complete abandonment of medical ethics in favor of research that treated human subjects as disposable materials for investigating the limits of biological manipulation and psychological control. The facility specialized in neural experiments, trauma conditioning, and surgical modification that crossed every boundary between healing and torture, while producing research data that served no legitimate medical purpose. The trauma override harnesses that Y-17 developed represented attempts to control human behavior through technological means, creating devices that could override conscious decision-making, while compelling subjects to perform actions against their will and moral judgment. The research treated human autonomy as a technical problem to be solved rather than a fundamental right to be protected, reducing conscious beings to remote-controlled mechanisms that served research objectives rather than their own interests and values. The electroshock therapy programs that Y-17 conducted pushed far beyond any legitimate medical application to explore the possibilities for erasing human memory and personality, while implanting artificial behavioral patterns that would make subjects more compliant and useful for research purposes. The systematic destruction of human identity through technological means represented the ultimate violation of individual dignity and consciousness. The surgical procedures that Y-17 performed on unwilling subjects included brain surgery, organ modification, and cybernetic implantation that altered fundamental aspects of human biology while eliminating the capacity for independent thought and moral reasoning that characterized conscious beings. The research treated the human body as experimental equipment, rather than recognizing it as the vessel of consciousness that deserved protection and respect. The lobotomization process that became Y-17's signature procedure transformed conscious human beings into mindless drones that could perform simple tasks without independent thought or moral resistance, creating a workforce of biological robots that eliminated the unpredictability and ethical concerns associated with human employees, while providing researchers with perfectly obedient subjects for continued experimentation and labor. Medtech research represented the corporate face of institutionalized human experimentation, operating under the guise of legitimate pharmaceutical research, while conducting experiments that violated every principle of medical ethics and human dignity. The facility's respectable corporate facade concealed research programs that targeted vulnerable populations for experimental drug trials that prioritized data collection over subject welfare while treating human suffering as acceptable cost for advancing corporate research objectives and profit margins. The viral disease research that Medtech conducted focused specifically on pathogens that affected children and teenagers, creating artificial diseases that could be studied through deliberate infection of young subjects who were imprisoned within the facility's heavily fortified containment cells. The targeting of minors for experimental infection represented perhaps the most morally reprehensible aspect of corporate research programs that treated human development as laboratory material for investigating disease progression and treatment efficacy. The containment cells that Medtech constructed for housing experimental subjects were designed as permanent prisons rather than temporary medical facilities, with reinforced construction and security systems that eliminated any possibility of escape, while providing easy access for researchers who needed to monitor disease progression and collect tissue samples from infected subjects. The architecture of the facility revealed its true purpose as a laboratory for human experimentation rather than a medical treatment center. The absence of informed consent procedures or legal documentation for Medtech's test subjects revealed the systematic nature of human trafficking and imprisonment that supported the company's research programs, as subjects were acquired through methods that avoided legal scrutiny, while ensuring that their disappearances would not generate investigations that might expose the company's experimental activities. The systematic exploitation of vulnerable populations demonstrated corporate willingness to commit serious crimes for research advantages. The prevent drug development that Medtech pursued represented the company's attempt to create treatments for artificially induced diseases, generating both the medical problems and their proposed solutions, while testing both pathogen and cure on the same human subjects, who had no choice about their participation in experimental programs that often resulted in permanent disability or death from either the disease or the proposed treatment. The severe side effects that characterized prevent included hair loss, cyst formation, and organ dysfunction that often proved more debilitating than the diseases the drug was supposed to treat, revealing the inadequate testing and quality control that characterized Medtech's approach to pharmaceutical development. The continuation of human trials despite obvious treatment failures demonstrated corporate prioritization of research completion over subject welfare and treatment efficacy. The procurement systems that Medtech established for acquiring human test subjects treated conscious beings as commodities to be purchased and consumed, with corporate budgets that included line items for human acquisition, while research protocols specified the numbers and characteristics of subjects required for various experimental programs. The commodification of human life through corporate accounting procedures demonstrated the complete dehumanization that characterized the company's approach to research subjects. The lockdown protocol that Medtech implemented during the Great War represented the ultimate corporate betrayal of both employees and test subjects, as facility executives used their advanced knowledge of the nuclear attack to escape while triggering security systems that trapped everyone else inside the building with no possibility of survival or rescue. The deliberate abandonment of human beings to ensure research security demonstrated the priorities that guided corporate decision-making during crisis situations. The automated security systems that enforced Medtech's lockdown continued operating long after the executives had fled, maintaining containment protocols that prevented escape while ensuring that evidence of corporate crimes would be preserved within the sealed facility rather than destroyed by nuclear attack or post-war scavengers. The mechanical enforcement of corporate policy continued decades after human oversight had ended, creating technological systems that served corporate interests rather than human welfare. The transformation of test subjects into feral ghouls within MedTech's sealed facility created a living monument to corporate cruelty, as the people who had been imprisoned and tortured for research purposes continued existing in forms that preserved their suffering while eliminating their capacity for human communication or social connection. The facility became a mechanical hell where the victims of corporate experimentation continued existing without hope of rescue or relief. The scientific establishments that Big Mountain and MedTech represented demonstrated how intellectual brilliance could be corrupted by institutional structures that eliminated ethical constraints while providing unlimited resources for research that served no legitimate human purpose. The transformation of scientific inquiry into systematic torture revealed the dangers of allowing research institutions to operate without democratic oversight or moral accountability, creating environments where human suffering became entertainment for researchers who had abandoned every principle that separated civilization from barbarism. The legacy of these research institutions extended far beyond their immediate victims, to encompass the creation of technological and biological threats that would continue endangering human survivors for generations. As escaped experimental creatures and abandoned research programs created permanent hazards that demonstrated the long-term consequences of prioritizing scientific advancement over human welfare and environmental protection. The pursuit of knowledge without wisdom had created monuments to human folly that would endure long after their creators had been forgotten. The fabric of daily American life in the decades before the Great War was woven from threads of corporate influence so pervasive that citizens rarely questioned how thoroughly private companies had infiltrated every aspect of their existence, from the fuel that powered their automobiles to the entertainment that shaped their cultural values, and the very information they received about the world beyond their immediate experience. These service industries promised convenience, efficiency, and prosperity, while systematically eliminating alternatives that might have preserved individual autonomy and community self-reliance, creating dependencies that transformed free citizens into captive consumers, whose choices were predetermined by corporate strategies designed to maximize profit extraction rather than human welfare. The corporations that emerged to dominate America's service economy understood that true market control required not merely providing superior products, but creating situations where consumers had no meaningful alternatives to corporate-controlled systems. These companies invested enormous resources in eliminating competition, manipulating government regulations, and engineering social changes that made independent living increasingly difficult, while corporate dependence became the only viable option for ordinary families seeking basic necessities and modest comfort in an increasingly complex and technologically dependent society. Red Rocket Corporation rose to prominence during the resource wars as America's transportation infrastructure struggled to adapt to the declining availability of petroleum fuels, transforming itself from a traditional gasoline retailer into the nation's dominant provider of fusion-powered transportation services, while maintaining the nostalgic aesthetic and cultural associations that made corporate control seem friendly and familiar rather than threatening or oppressive. The company's distinctive ray gun Gothic architecture became as ubiquitous across American highways as government road signs, creating a landscape where corporate branding was indistinguishable from public infrastructure. The architectural uniformity that Red Rocket imposed across thousands of locations served not merely aesthetic purposes but psychological conditioning, creating environments where travelers could instantly recognize corporate facilities while feeling comfortable in standardized spaces that eliminated the unpredictability and local character that had traditionally made American road travel an adventure of discovery rather than predictable consumption of corporate services designed to maximize revenue extraction from captive customers. The transition from fossil fuels to fusion energy that Red Rocket navigated during the resource wars demonstrated the company's adaptability and strategic planning, but it also revealed how corporations could exploit national crises to eliminate competition and consolidate market control while presenting themselves as patriotic institutions serving national security interests rather than opportunistic businesses taking advantage of public desperation to establish monopolistic positions in essential service markets. The fusion fuel technology that Red Rocket adopted during the 2060s created new forms of consumer dependence, as fusion cores and coolant systems required specialized knowledge and equipment that only corporate technicians could provide, eliminating the mechanical self-reliance that had characterized automobile ownership when vehicles used simpler technologies that ordinary people could understand and maintain independently. The complexity of fusion systems served corporate interests by ensuring that customers would require ongoing corporate services while lacking alternatives to corporate-controlled supply chains. The pricing strategies that Red Rocket employed for fusion coolant revealed the company's exploitation of consumer ignorance about technical specifications, as premium high-octane coolant priced at $113.99 per unit provided no genuine performance advantages over the standard coolant that cost $103.99. But the price differential created the illusion of choice while extracting additional revenue from customers who could afford to purchase prestige rather than mere functionality. The expansion of Red Rocket facilities, beyond simple fuel sales to encompass full-service automotive centers with automated diners, convenience stores, and car washes, demonstrated the company's understanding that true market dominance required controlling every aspect of customer experience during travel, transforming brief fuel stops into extended commercial encounters that maximized revenue opportunities, while reducing customer exposure to competitors who might offer alternative approaches to transportation services. The bioengineered hamburgers that Red Rocket served through its automated dining facilities represented the company's entry into food service markets that had traditionally been dominated by local restaurants and regional chains, using advanced food technology to create standardized products that could be produced efficiently while maintaining consistent taste and appearance across thousands of locations. The scientific precision that went into creating artificial food experiences eliminated the variability and authentic local flavors that had made regional cuisine culturally significant and personally meaningful. The Protectron robots that Red Rocket employed for customer service eliminated human jobs while creating the illusion of advanced technological capability, as mechanical attendants could work continuously without wages, benefits, or labor protections, while providing cheerful corporate messaging that masked the elimination of employment opportunities for human workers who had traditionally staffed service stations and automotive facilities throughout America. The environmental messaging that Red Rocket employed to market its services represented sophisticated greenwashing campaigns that associated corporate fuel sales with environmental responsibility, while concealing the actual environmental costs of fusion technology production and waste disposal. The company's clean energy slogans created positive associations that distracted customers from investigating the true environmental impact of corporate operations that prioritized profit margins over genuine ecological responsibility. The Trashbusters Awards that Red Rocket created to recognize stations for waste reduction served not genuine environmental protection but public relations objectives, as many award recipients had simply become more effective at hiding waste disposal rather than actually reducing environmental impact. The recognition programs created positive publicity while allowing continued environmental violations that were concealed rather than corrected, demonstrating how corporate environmental programs often served marketing rather than ecological objectives. The automation of customer service through Protectron attendants that echoed corporate slogans 24 hours per day created environments where customers were subjected to constant corporate messaging while being denied genuine human interaction that might have provided alternative perspectives or critical evaluation of corporate claims. The mechanical repetition of approved messages eliminated the possibility for meaningful communication while ensuring that every customer encounter reinforced corporate branding and marketing objectives. The tourism promotion that Red Rocket conducted through board games like Across America represented the company's expansion into cultural influence and social engineering, as corporate-sponsored entertainment directed consumer attention toward destinations and activities that served corporate interests, while presenting these influences as neutral recreational activities rather than sophisticated alarms. Marketing campaigns designed to shape consumer behavior and cultural values. The migration patterns that Red Rocket influenced through its tourism promotion concentrated population growth in areas where corporate facilities were most profitable, while directing workers away from regions where labor organizing, environmental regulation might constrain corporate operations. The apparent randomness of American demographic changes actually reflected corporate strategies designed to optimize business conditions while appearing to result from individual consumer choices rather than systematic corporate manipulation. The anti-competitive practices that Red Rocket employed to eliminate independent service stations included predatory pricing, exclusive supplier agreements, and political influence that made independent operation economically impossible while maintaining the fiction of competitive markets where consumer choice determined business success rather than corporate power and political manipulation, determining which businesses would be allowed to survive and prosper. The regional variations that had historically characterized American travel experiences were systematically eliminated through Red Rocket's standardization policies, replacing local businesses that reflected community character and regional preferences with uniform corporate facilities that provided identical experiences regardless of geographic location. The homogenization of American culture served corporate efficiency while impoverishing the diversity and authenticity that had made different regions culturally distinctive and personally meaningful for travelers. The post-war legacy of Red Rocket facilities scattered throughout the wasteland serves as monuments to corporate ubiquity and the elimination of alternatives, as their distinctive architecture remains recognizable decades after their corporate parents ceased to exist, while the independent businesses they displaced left no trace of their former existence. The survival of corporate branding while local culture disappeared demonstrates the durability of corporate influence compared to the fragility of community-based institutions and authentic regional character. Hubris Comics emerged in 2021 as a multimedia entertainment corporation that understood the power of popular culture to shape public attitudes and values, transforming simple comic book publication into a comprehensive cultural influence operation that extended from print media through radio programming to toy manufacturing and electronic entertainment that reached American consumers through multiple channels simultaneously. The company's expansion beyond traditional comic books demonstrated sophisticated understanding of how entertainment industries could be integrated to create overwhelming cultural influence that shaped public consciousness more effectively than any government propaganda program. The founding of Hubris Comics, as a subsidiary of Hubris Publishing, revealed the interconnected nature of media corporations that appeared to offer diverse entertainment options while actually serving unified corporate strategies designed to maximize influence over public opinion and consumer behavior. The integration of publishing operations allowed corporate executives to coordinate messaging across multiple media formats while maintaining the illusion of independent content creation by diverse creative teams rather than centralized corporate control over cultural production. The character development that made Grognak the Barbarian and the Silver Shroud cultural icons demonstrated Hubris Comics' understanding of mythological storytelling and psychological archetypes that could capture public imagination, while subtly reinforcing political and social values that served corporate and government interests. The popularity of these characters created emotional connections that transcended simple entertainment consumption to become aspects of personal identity and cultural participation that influenced how readers understood themselves and their relationships to authority and violence. The multimedia expansion that brought Silver Shroud to radio programming created shared cultural experiences that united audiences across geographic and social boundaries, while ensuring that corporate messaging reached consumers through multiple sensory channels that reinforced each other to create more powerful psychological impact than any single medium could achieve independently. The coordination of print and audio content demonstrated sophisticated understanding of how entertainment could be engineered to maximize cultural influence and behavioral modification. The toy manufacturing and board game development that Hubris Comics pursued created physical objects that brought corporate intellectual property into homes and social gatherings, transforming private spaces into extensions of corporate marketing while encouraging consumers to purchase multiple products that reinforced the same cultural messages through different activities and age groups. The integration of entertainment with physical products ensured that corporate influence would persist in domestic environments, even when consumers were not actively engaging with primary media content. The holotape video game development that Hubris Comics pioneered represented the company's early adoption of electronic entertainment technology that would eventually dominate popular culture while creating new forms of interactive media that required active participation rather than passive consumption. The games provided more engaging and memorable experiences than traditional media while collecting detailed information about player behavior and preferences that could be used to refine future content for maximum psychological impact and commercial success. The government partnerships that Hubris Comics established with Vault-Tec and military agencies revealed how entertainment corporations could serve propaganda functions while maintaining the appearance of independent creative content rather than government-sponsored messaging designed to shape public opinion and encourage support for controversial policies. The integration of Vault Boy characters into comic narratives demonstrated how corporate mascots could be shared between companies to create unified cultural campaigns that served multiple institutional interests simultaneously. The military propaganda that Hubris Comics produced through the Tales from the Front series represented the systematic use of entertainment media to promote militaristic attitudes and uncritical support for government foreign policy, while disguising political messaging as patriotic entertainment that celebrated American values and military heroism. The comics created emotional associations between entertainment consumption and political compliance, while making critical evaluation of military policies seem unpatriotic and socially unacceptable. The titles that Hubris Comics published for military propaganda campaigns included Liberated Canada, The Red Terror, and Someone Must Die, revealing the explicitly violent and xenophobic messaging that the company promoted through entertainment that was marketed to children and families as innocent recreational content, rather than sophisticated political indoctrination designed to create public support for aggressive foreign policies and domestic surveillance programs that violated traditional American values and constitutional protections. The creative drama and executive meddling that characterized Hubris Comics' television production revealed how corporate entertainment development prioritized commercial considerations over artistic integrity or meaningful content, as projects were subjected to endless rewrites and committee oversight that eliminated controversial or challenging material, while ensuring that final products would appeal to the broadest possible audience without offending corporate sponsors or government partners who provided essential financial and political support. The Hubris Comics game studio that produced electronic entertainment represented the company's expansion into interactive media that required more sophisticated technology while providing more detailed information about consumer behavior and psychological responses than traditional media formats could generate. The game served both entertainment and surveillance functions while creating more engaging experiences that encouraged longer consumption periods and more frequent purchases of related products and services. The failure of Hubris Comics' most ambitious interactive projects to reach completion before the Great War demonstrated how corporate entertainment development could become so complex and expensive that commercial viability became secondary to technological demonstration and corporate prestige. Projects that served executive vanity rather than consumer needs or genuine entertainment value. The resources devoted to failed projects represented enormous waste that could have supported genuine cultural development rather than corporate self-aggrandizement. The integration of comic book characters into government propaganda revealed how thoroughly entertainment corporations had been absorbed into political influence operations that used popular culture as a delivery system for ideological messaging designed to create public support for policies that would not survive critical examination if presented through traditional political channels. The transformation of entertainment into propaganda represented a fundamental threat to democratic discourse and independent cultural development. Vault-Tec Corporation represented perhaps the most comprehensive corporate deception ever attempted, using the promise of safety and survival to create the largest human experimentation program in recorded history, while maintaining public facades that portrayed the company as humanity's protector rather than its most dangerous enemy. The scale and systematic nature of Vault-Tec's operations demonstrated how corporate structures could be used to implement programs that violated every principle of human dignity, while maintaining legal and political protection through government partnerships and public relations, campaigns that concealed criminal activities behind patriotic rhetoric and scientific legitimacy. The Vault construction program that Vault-Tec marketed as protective infrastructure actually created hundreds of sophisticated prison laboratories where entire communities could be subjected to long-term experimentation without possibility of escape or outside intervention. The massive scale of the deception required coordination between corporate executives, government officials, and scientific researchers who shared responsibility for crimes that affected thousands of families while generating research data that served no legitimate scientific or social purpose beyond satisfying institutional curiosity about human behavioral limits. The social experimentation that Vault-Tec conducted through its Vault programs represented systematic torture, disguised as scientific research, as entire communities were subjected to psychological manipulation, forced social conflict, and deliberate deprivation that served no purpose, beyond generating data about human responses to extreme stress and social disruption. The experiments violated every principle of scientific ethics, while producing information that could only be used for developing more effective methods of social control and population manipulation. The 17 control vaults that actually functioned as advertised represented less than 5% of Vault-Tec's total construction, revealing how thoroughly the company had abandoned its stated mission of protecting American citizens in favor of using them as experimental subjects for research programs that treated human welfare as irrelevant to scientific advancement and corporate profit objectives. The tiny percentage of genuine shelters demonstrated that human protection was never a serious consideration in corporate planning or resource allocation. The surveillance systems that Vault-Tec installed in every facility created comprehensive monitoring capabilities that recorded every aspect of residents' lives while providing detailed information about psychological responses to experimental conditions. The systematic violation of privacy served research objectives while ensuring that no aspect of human behavior would escape corporate documentation and analysis, creating permanent records of human suffering that were treated as valuable corporate assets rather than evidence of criminal activity. The authorization systems that allowed overseers to exercise absolute power over vault populations created artificial dictatorships, where individual corporate employees could implement whatever policies they chose, while residents had no recourse to external authorities or legal protections that might constrain experimental programs. The concentration of power in single individuals eliminated democratic decision-making while ensuring that research protocols would be implemented regardless of their impact on human welfare. The behavioral modification programs that many vaults implemented used combinations of pharmaceutical intervention, environmental manipulation, and social pressure to alter personality characteristics and psychological responses according to research protocols that treated human consciousness as raw material for engineering projects designed to create more compliant and manageable populations. The systematic destruction of individual autonomy served corporate interests while eliminating the diversity of human thought and behavior that characterized healthy communities. The failure rates that characterized most Vault experiments resulted in complete population loss through suicide, violence, or psychological breakdown that eliminated entire communities while providing research data about the limits of human endurance and social stability. The systematic killing of experimental subjects through deliberate policy implementation represented genocide conducted under the guise of scientific research and public safety preparation. The corporate culture that enabled Vault-Tec's crimes demonstrated how institutional structures could normalize the most heinous activities by distributing responsibility across multiple departments and hierarchical levels while maintaining secrecy through compartmentalization and legal agreements that prevented individual employees from understanding the full scope of corporate activities or their moral implications. The bureaucratization of evil made individual resistance more difficult, while corporate executives maintained plausible deniability about specific criminal activities. The government partnerships that provided Vault-Tec with legal protection and financial resources revealed how thoroughly corporations could corrupt democratic institutions when their activities served perceived national security, interests, or provided research data that government agencies wanted to obtain without direct responsibility for human rights violations. The integration of corporate crimes with government policy eliminated meaningful oversight while creating institutional incentives for continued expansion of experimental programs, regardless of their human costs. The marketing campaigns that Vault-Tec employed to recruit experimental subjects used sophisticated psychological manipulation to create artificial demand for Vault admission while concealing the true nature of the programs behind. Patriotic rhetoric and scientific legitimacy that made participation seem like civic duty rather than voluntary enrollment in human experimentation programs. The systematic deception of entire communities represented fraud on an unprecedented scale that affected hundreds of thousands of families. The service industries that dominated pre-war American life created a society where corporate control extended into every aspect of daily experience, while eliminating alternatives that might have preserved individual autonomy and community self-reliance. The systematic replacement of independent businesses and local institutions with corporate-controlled systems transformed free citizens into dependent consumers whose choices were predetermined by profit maximization strategies rather than human welfare considerations, creating the foundation for totalitarian control disguised as market-based freedom and technological progress. The smaller enterprises and regional operations that existed in the shadow of America's corporate titans represented the last vestiges of independent business culture and community-based economic activity, serving local populations with products and services that reflected regional preferences and authentic cultural traditions, rather than the standardized offerings that characterized mass-market corporate strategies. These companies operated on scales that allowed personal relationships between owners and customers, creating accountability mechanisms that ensured quality and service standards while preserving economic diversity that made local communities more resilient and self-sufficient than areas dominated by corporate chains and franchises. But even these smaller players could not escape the corrupting influences of a business environment where corporate practices had become normalized across all scales of operation. As regional companies found themselves adopting the same cost-cutting measures, deceptive marketing techniques, and disregard for consumer welfare that characterized their larger competitors. The pressure to remain competitive in markets increasingly dominated by corporations with vast resources and political connections forced smaller companies to compromise their principles while struggling to maintain market share against entities that could sustain losses indefinitely to eliminate competition. Blamco represented the insidious nature of corporate food production that prioritized shelf stability and production efficiency over nutritional value and consumer health, creating processed food products that could survive for centuries while gradually poisoning the people who consumed them during their normal lifespans. The company's specialization in mac and cheese manufacturing demonstrated how corporations could take traditional comfort foods and transform them into industrial products that bore only superficial resemblance to the wholesome meals that had nourished previous generations of American families. The preservation technology that allowed Blamco products to maintain apparent edibility for over 200 years after production revealed the extent of chemical processing and artificial additive use that characterized corporate food manufacturing, as natural ingredients were replaced with synthetic compounds that could withstand extreme environmental conditions while providing no genuine nutritional benefit to consumers who mistook chemical stability for food quality. The ability of processed foods to survive conditions that would destroy organic matter demonstrated how thoroughly corporate products had diverged from anything that could be considered natural human nourishment. The instant noodle products that Blamco expanded into during their later operations represented the globalization of industrial food processing that eliminated regional cuisine variations while creating standardized products that could be mass-produced and distributed without regard for local food traditions or dietary preferences. The convenience that these products offered came at the cost of culinary diversity and nutritional quality, replacing prepared meals with chemical mixtures that satisfied hunger, while failing to provide the complex nutrition that human physiology required for optimal health and development. The marketing strategies that Blamco employed emphasized convenience and affordability, while carefully avoiding any discussion of nutritional content or long-term health effects, creating advertising campaigns that associated processed foods with family values and American traditions, while concealing the industrial processes that had eliminated most of the characteristics that made traditional foods culturally meaningful and nutritionally valuable. The transformation of eating from cultural activity into mere consumption of standardized products served corporate efficiency while impoverishing human experience. The health implications of consuming ultra-processed foods that could survive apocalyptic conditions while maintaining palatability suggested that these products contained chemicals and preservatives that were fundamentally incompatible with human digestive systems and metabolic processes, creating long-term health risks that would manifest over decades of consumption, while providing short-term satisfaction that encouraged continued purchase and consumption of products that gradually undermined consumer health and vitality. The representation of corporate food industry practices that Blamco embodied revealed how thoroughly industrial food production had prioritized profit maximization over human welfare, creating manufacturing systems that treated food as a commercial product, rather than recognizing nutrition as a fundamental human need that required careful attention to quality, safety, and cultural appropriateness, rather than merely cost efficiency and market penetration. Capital Post emerged as Washington, D.C.'s primary newspaper during an era when media corporations had abandoned objective journalism in favor of propaganda distribution and corporate influence operations disguised as news, reporting, and editorial commentary. The newspaper's location in the nation's capital provided access to government sources and political developments, while also creating dependencies on official sources that compromised editorial independence and encouraged uncritical acceptance of government narratives about domestic and foreign policy developments. The Cold War era messaging that characterized much of Capital Post's content reflected the systematic integration of media corporations with government intelligence and propaganda operations, as editors and reporters received information and editorial guidance from official sources, while maintaining the fiction of independent journalism that served public information needs rather than government public relations objectives. The anti-communist articles that filled the newspaper's pages created emotional responses that supported government policies while discouraging critical analysis of official claims about international threats and domestic security requirements. The Vault-Tec advertising partnerships that Capital Post maintained represented the newspaper's willingness to accept revenue from corporations, regardless of their activities or impact on public welfare, as advertising dollars provided essential financial support while creating editorial pressures to avoid negative coverage of corporate sponsors who might withdraw financial support if their activities were subjected to critical investigation or unfavorable publicity that might damage their reputations or reduce their market effectiveness. The military propaganda that Capital Post published through articles celebrating American military interventions and foreign policy initiatives demonstrated how media corporations could serve government interests while maintaining the appearance of independent news coverage rather than coordinated information warfare designed to create public support for controversial policies that might not survive democratic debate, if their true costs and consequences were accurately reported and analyzed. The high-level government connections that Capital Post's editorial staff maintained through social and professional relationships created conflicts of interest that compromised the newspaper's ability to provide objective coverage of government activities, as reporters and editors who depended on official sources for information and social status were unlikely to publish articles that might jeopardize their access to insider information or their acceptance within Washington's political establishment and social hierarchy. The complicity in corporate conspiracies that Capital Post demonstrated through its willingness to publish corporate advertising and government propaganda without adequate investigation or disclosure revealed how thoroughly media corporations had abandoned their traditional role as independent watchdogs serving public interests in favor of serving as distribution channels for messages that served corporate and government interests, regardless of their impact on democratic discourse and public welfare. The media manipulation that Capital Post participated in through selective reporting, editorial bias, and advertiser influence demonstrated how ostensibly independent news sources could be co-opted to serve propaganda functions while maintaining credibility with audiences who believed they were receiving objective information rather than carefully crafted messaging designed to influence their political attitudes and consumer behavior according to institutional rather than public interests. Lobster Grill represented the regional restaurant chains that had emerged to serve local food preferences and cultural traditions before being absorbed or eliminated by national corporate franchises that standardized food service while eliminating the diversity and authenticity that had made regional cuisine culturally significant and personally meaningful for travelers and local residents who valued connection to place and tradition rather than merely convenient access to predictable corporate products. The seafood focus that characterized Lobster Grill's menu reflected the company's connection to coastal communities where fishing industries provided fresh ingredients and cultural traditions that made seafood consumption part of regional identity rather than simply commercial food. Service designed to maximize profit extraction from customers who viewed dining as functional necessity rather than cultural experience that connected them to local communities and traditional practices. The regional presence that Lobster Grill maintained in Maine and West Virginia demonstrated how successful local businesses could serve multiple markets while preserving the local character and community connections that made regional companies more responsive to customer needs and cultural preferences than national chains that prioritized operational efficiency and cost reduction over customer satisfaction and cultural authenticity that required local knowledge and community engagement. The post-war irony that transformed Lobster Grill's delivery vehicles into shells for mutated hermit crabs revealed how thoroughly the corporate infrastructure had integrated with the natural environment, as corporate branding and industrial materials became permanent parts of the post-war ecosystem while serving functions entirely different from their original commercial purposes. The appropriation of corporate vehicles by wildlife demonstrated the ultimate irrelevance of human commercial activities compared to the adaptive capabilities of natural systems. The parallel between Lobster Grill and Red Lobster highlighted how regional companies had operated in markets that would eventually be dominated by national chains that could leverage superior financial resources and marketing capabilities to eliminate local competition while providing standardized products that eliminated the regional variations and cultural authenticity that had made local restaurants culturally significant and economically viable. Before corporate standardization eliminated diversity in favor of operational efficiency, the additional regional corporations that operated throughout pre-war America represented the diversity and local character that had traditionally characterized American business culture before corporate consolidation eliminated most independent enterprises in favor of standardized operations that served corporate interests rather than community needs or cultural preservation. These smaller companies provided employment opportunities, local ownership, and community accountability that disappeared when corporate chains replaced independent businesses with standardized operations managed by distant executives who had no connection to local communities. The absorption of independent businesses by mega-corporations represented systematic destruction of economic diversity and community self-reliance, as successful local companies were either purchased or driven out of business by competitors with superior financial resources and political connections that allowed them to operate at losses until independent competition was eliminated. The consolidation of business ownership concentrated economic power while eliminating the entrepreneurial opportunities and community connections that had traditionally provided economic mobility and local accountability. The resistance that some regional companies mounted against corporate expansion demonstrated the courage and determination required to maintain independent business operations in an economic environment increasingly dominated by entities that could sustain enormous losses to eliminate competition, while using political influence to create regulatory advantages that made independent operation economically impossible. The failure of most resistance efforts revealed the systemic nature of corporate advantage in American business environments. The community impact of corporate consolidation extended far beyond simple business competition to encompass the destruction of local economic networks and social relationships that had traditionally provided community resilience and cultural continuity. The replacement of locally owned businesses with corporate operations eliminated community leadership opportunities while directing profits to distant shareholders rather than local reinvestment that had traditionally supported community development and cultural institutions. The cultural loss that resulted from corporate standardization eliminated regional variations in products, services, and business practices that had reflected local preferences and traditional knowledge accumulated over generations of community experience. The homogenization of American business culture impoverished local communities while creating economic dependencies that made them vulnerable to corporate decisions made without consideration of local needs or cultural values. The smaller players in America's pre-war economy represented the last vestiges of democratic capitalism and community-based enterprise that had traditionally provided economic opportunity and local accountability while preserving cultural diversity and regional identity. The systematic elimination of these enterprises through corporate consolidation and predatory competition transformed American economic life from a diverse ecosystem of independent businesses serving community needs into a standardized system of corporate extraction that treated local communities as resource sources rather than partners in economic development and cultural preservation. The tragedy of these smaller enterprises lay not merely in their economic failure, but in the loss of alternative approaches to business organization and community service that might have provided different models for economic development if they had been allowed to survive and evolve, rather than being systematically eliminated by corporate strategies that treated diversity and independence as obstacles to efficiency and profit maximization, rather than valuable characteristics that served human welfare and community resilience. The intricate web of relationships that bound America's corporate giants together in the decades before the Great War represented far more than simple business partnerships or competitive arrangements. It embodied a systematic coordination of economic, political, and social control that transformed ostensibly independent companies into components of a unified system designed to extract maximum value from American society while eliminating any meaningful alternatives to corporate-dominated life. These interconnections created feedback loops that reinforced corporate power while making democratic oversight increasingly impossible, as government regulators found themselves negotiating with networks of mutually supporting entities rather than individual companies that could be held accountable for specific violations of law or ethical standards. The corporate partnerships that emerged during this period were carefully designed to appear as normal business relationships, while actually serving as coordination mechanisms that allowed companies to share information, divide markets, and coordinate political influence in ways that would have been obviously illegal if conducted openly by a single corporate entity. The complexity of these arrangements made regulatory enforcement nearly impossible, while creating plausible deniability for individual executives who could claim ignorance of activities conducted by partner organizations rather than their own companies directly. Vault-Tec Corporation served as the central coordinating entity for much of this corporate cooperation, using its massive construction projects and government contracts to create opportunities for other companies to participate in integrated programs that served multiple corporate interests simultaneously, while maintaining the fiction of competitive bidding and independent business decision-making. The Vault construction program required specialized equipment, materials, and services that could only be provided by companies with specific technological capabilities and security clearances, creating natural partnership opportunities that excluded potential competitors while ensuring that profits would be shared among established corporate allies. The coordination meetings that Vault-Tec hosted brought together representatives from Robco Industries, West-Tek, General Atomics, Poseidon Energy, and other major corporations to discuss not merely individual contracts but comprehensive strategies for managing American society through technological systems and social engineering programs that would serve corporate interests while maintaining public support through carefully crafted propaganda and consumer manipulation. These gatherings created informal governance structures that operated beyond democratic oversight while making decisions that affected millions of Americans. The resource-sharing arrangements that emerged from these partnerships allowed companies to combine their specialized capabilities while avoiding the costs and risks associated with developing competing technologies independently. Robco's software expertise complemented General Atomics' hardware manufacturing, while West-Tek's biological research enhanced Vault-Tek's social experimentation programs, and Poseidon Energy's power generation supported all corporate activities that required massive amounts of reliable electricity for research, manufacturing, and facility operations. The technology transfer agreements that characterized these partnerships ensured that innovations developed by one company would be available to corporate allies while remaining inaccessible to potential competitors or government agencies that might use them for purposes that conflicted with corporate interests. The controlled distribution of technological capabilities created artificial scarcity that maintained corporate competitive advantages while preventing the kind of widespread technological adoption that might have enhanced individual autonomy or community self-reliance. The mutual protection networks that corporations established through shared legal resources, political influence, and public relations capabilities meant that attacks on any individual company would be countered by coordinated responses from multiple entities with complementary strengths and resources. Corporate executives who faced criminal investigation could rely on character witnesses from partner companies, while political pressure campaigns could combine the influence of multiple industries to overwhelm opposition from consumer groups, environmental organizations, or government reformers who lacked comparable resources and coordination. The revolving door employment practices that moved executives between partner companies created personal relationships and shared interests that transcended formal corporate boundaries, as individuals who had worked for multiple companies in the corporate network maintained loyalty to the overall system rather than any particular employer. These career patterns ensured that corporate strategies would be coordinated across company lines, while creating insider knowledge networks that could anticipate and counter potential threats to corporate interests. The government contract coordination that characterized corporate partnerships allowed companies to present unified responses to federal procurement opportunities while ensuring that contracts would be distributed among network members rather than awarded to genuine competitors who might challenge established corporate practices or offer alternative approaches to meeting government needs. The appearance of competitive bidding concealed predetermined arrangements that served corporate interests while providing government agencies with plausible claims about fair and open procurement processes. The research and development collaboration that linked corporate partners created shared technological capabilities while eliminating redundant research efforts that might have led to genuine innovation or alternative approaches to solving technical problems. The coordination of research priorities ensured that corporate resources would be focused on projects that served network interests rather than being dispersed across multiple competing approaches that might have produced better solutions, or unexpected breakthroughs that could disrupt established market relationships. The information sharing networks that connected corporate partners provided early warning systems about regulatory threats, market developments, and political changes that might affect corporate interests, allowing coordinated responses that could neutralize challenges before they developed into serious threats to corporate profits or operational freedom. The systematic monitoring of government activities, academic research, and public opinion created intelligence capabilities that rivaled government agencies while serving private rather than public interests. The market manipulation strategies that corporate partners employed included coordinated pricing, supply chain control, and artificial scarcity creation that eliminated genuine price competition while maintaining the appearance of market-based economics. The ability to coordinate activities across multiple industries allowed corporate networks to create economic conditions that served their interests, while making alternative business models economically impossible for potential competitors who lacked access to the same coordination mechanisms and resource sharing arrangements. The environmental damage that resulted from corporate coordination included the systematic externalization of pollution costs and resource depletion consequences that were distributed across multiple companies and jurisdictions to prevent accountability for the cumulative environmental impact of corporate activities. The complexity of environmental damage attribution made regulatory enforcement nearly impossible, while allowing continued environmental destruction that served short-term corporate profits while imposing long-term costs on promise. Communities and ecosystems that lacked political representation or legal protection. The human experimentation programs that various corporations conducted were coordinated through information sharing and subject exchange arrangements that allowed companies to conduct more comprehensive research while distributing legal, liability, and ethical responsibility across multiple institutions. The systematic abuse of human research subjects was enabled by corporate cooperation that provided access to vulnerable populations while creating plausible deniability about individual corporate responsibility for obvious human rights violations. The worker displacement that resulted from automation coordination eliminated employment opportunities across multiple industries simultaneously, creating unemployment crises that were too large and systematic for traditional social safety nets or retraining programs to address effectively. The coordinated implementation of labor-replacing technologies served corporate cost reduction while creating social instability that weakened organized labor and community resistance to corporate policies. The consumer manipulation that corporate partners achieved through coordinated marketing campaigns created artificial demand for products and services that served corporate profits rather than genuine human needs, while systematic elimination of alternatives made resistance to corporate products increasingly difficult for consumers, who found themselves trapped in systems designed to extract maximum value from their purchasing decisions and lifestyle choices. The democratic institution erosion that resulted from corporate coordination included systematic undermining of regulatory agencies, electoral processes, and civic organizations that might have provided alternative sources of authority and accountability to corporate power. The concentration of economic resources in corporate networks created political influence that overwhelmed democratic decision-making while maintaining the fiction of representative government and citizen participation in public policy formation. The price of progress that America paid for corporate technological advancement included the systematic sacrifice of human dignity, environmental protection, and democratic accountability in favor of innovations that served corporate interests rather than human welfare or social development. The technologies that corporations developed often created more problems than they solved while generating profits that were concentrated among corporate shareholders rather than being shared with the communities that bore the costs of technological development and implementation. The social fabric destruction that resulted from corporate policies included the elimination of community institutions, family structures, and cultural traditions that had previously provided meaning, stability, and mutual support for American citizens, who found themselves increasingly isolated and dependent on corporate systems for basic needs and social connection. The replacement of organic social relationships with corporate-mediated interactions served corporate control objectives while impoverishing human experience and community resilience. The web of corporate connections that dominated pre-war America created a system of economic and political control that was more comprehensive and systematic than any previous form of social organization, while maintaining democratic facades that concealed the extent of corporate dominance over American life. The coordination of corporate activities eliminated meaningful competition and democratic accountability, while creating technological and social systems that served corporate interests at the expense of human welfare, environmental protection, and cultural development that had traditionally provided the foundation for civilized society and individual flourishing. The ultimate consequence of this corporate coordination was the creation of social, economic, and technological systems that made catastrophic conflict increasingly likely, while developing weapons and strategies that would ensure maximum destruction when conflict inevitably occurred. The corporate networks that had promised to deliver prosperity and security instead created the conditions that made global nuclear war seem like a reasonable solution to international tensions that had been artificially created and systematically escalated by corporate interests that profited from conflict while being insulated from its consequences. The Great War that ended pre-war civilization was not an accident or the result of political failures, but the inevitable outcome of corporate systems that had subordinated human welfare to profit maximization while developing technologies and strategies that made peaceful conflict resolution increasingly impossible. The corporations that had promised to build a better future instead created the weapons, the tensions, and the institutional structures that ensured their vision of progress would culminate in the destruction of the civilization they claimed to serve, leaving behind only radioactive ruins and bitter lessons about the ultimate consequences of allowing corporate interests to override human values and democratic decision-making. And so we reach the end of our journey through corporate America's golden age that was built on foundations of shadow and deception. These titans of industry promised a bright atomic future while conducting experiments that would make even the wasteland's horrors seem merciful by comparison. They automated away human dignity, poisoned the very air and water that sustained life, and treated conscious beings as disposable test subjects in pursuit of profit and power. When the bombs fell on October 23rd, 2077, they did not create the wasteland's moral emptiness. They merely revealed what corporate America had already become. The vaults that promised salvation were torture chambers. The robots that promised convenience were instruments of oppression. The energy that promised abundance was harvested from human suffering. Rest now, wanderer, knowing that in our world we still have the power to choose different paths. The corporations chronicled tonight serve as cautionary tales from a timeline where unchecked capitalism consumed every restraint that conscience and law might have provided. Sleep peacefully and dream of a future where human dignity matters more than quarterly profits, where progress serves people rather than consuming them. The wasteland remembers what we choose to forget, that civilization's true test lies not in what we can build, but in what we refuse to destroy in the building.